good morning and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of May 9th, 2023. We'll begin this morning by taking attendance, and I'll ask our General Counsel, Mark Silberman, to call the roll.
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Chu.
Here.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Master.
Here.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
All right, good morning and welcome again to our May 9th public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We'll begin this morning with a public meeting item from the research department. It's a proposal for a historic district, and we've already had a public hearing for this item. So we'll be listening to a presentation and taking a vote on the designation today. And then we'll move to our Preservation Department public hearing and public meeting agenda. We'll start our agendas with our hearing day with the public meeting agenda, which are items that have already had a public hearing and are back today with revised proposals in response to the comments made at the public hearing. And then we'll move to our public hearing agenda for new applications for work on designated properties. And this meeting and hearing is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. So if you would like to testify in any of the public hearing items, you may do so by joining the Zoom meeting at the estimated time, which for the item that you're interested in, which can be found on the public hearing agenda, which can be found on our website. And if you'd like to watch the proceedings, you may do so on our YouTube channel. And with that, I will turn it over to Kate Lemos-McHale, our Director of Research, to take us through our first public meeting item today.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Item number 1 is LP 2665, the proposed Linden Street Historic District in Brooklyn, with the boundary as defined in the agenda and shown in this presentation. And presenting this morning is Mary Ann Hurley.
Good morning. The proposed Linden Street Historic District is a remarkably intact group of 32 brick and brownstone row houses built between 1885 and 1901. Designed by Brooklyn architects, these distinctive row houses represent a highly successful integration of late 19th century picturesque styles, the Queen Anne, the Neo-Grecque, the Romanesque, and Renaissance revivals. Representing the area's transition from farmland to residential, this architecturally and historically significant district stands out as a unified streetscape with a strong sense of place. At the public hearing on February 28th, 8 people testified in support of designation, including representatives of the Historic Districts Council, the Bushwick Historic Preservation Association, South Bronx Cares, and 5 individuals. 1 individual opposed the designation. In addition, 6 letters from members of the Bushwick Historic Preservation Association were received in support. No letters were received in opposition. The proposed Linden Street Historic District consists of row houses along the section of Linden Street between Broadway and Bushwick Avenue in Brooklyn. The proposed district is in the southern area of Bushwick and would be the neighborhood's first historic district. Currently, there are 8 individual landmark designations in the vicinity, as shown in pink on the map, including freestanding houses, civic and religious buildings. The proposed Linden Street Historic District had been identified in agency surveys, and more recently, research staff has studied it carefully in the context of Bushwick Avenue and the neighborhood's late 19th and early 20th century development. Its distinctive row houses, united by the continuous nature of the streetscape and its intact historic character, distinguish the proposed district within the broader Bushwick area. Bushwick is one of the original 6 towns in Brooklyn, chartered by the Dutch in 1661. During the 18th and early 19th centuries, Brooklyn remained mostly undeveloped, with early roadways serving farmland and small villages. In 1854, Bushwick, along with Williamsburg and Greenport Point, became part of the city of Brooklyn. As shown in this 1880 map on the right, streets had been laid out in preparation for Bushwick's development, but little had been built by then, except scattered wood frame buildings and several short rows of masonry row houses. There were no row houses on this section of Linden Street between Broadway and Bushwick Avenue yet. By 1888, as the Broadway elevated began service nearby, and is shown in an orange line to the left along the map, this created the opportunity for a thriving transportation and commercial corridor, resulting in extensive speculative row house development nearby. 10 years after the elevated train began service, the neighborhood experienced rapid development. Most blocks were filled with both masonry and frame houses. Most of the masonry buildings were concentrated between Broadway and Bushwick Avenue, like Linden Street, shown here in dashed lines. By 1901, all of the row houses were completed within the proposed historic district. Over the years, many of the houses shown on this 1898 map have been altered or replaced, but those on Linden Street remain an intact collection and stand out within the broader area. A section of Linden Street proposed for designation was developed by Samuel Meeker and later by his family after he died in 1891. A prominent lawyer and one of the founders of Williamsburg Savings Bank, he built his own stylish Italianate house in 1852 on a large lot along Bushwick Avenue at the corner of Linden Street. The villa stood until the late 1920s when it was demolished. The photograph of Meeker's house in the foreground was taken in 1923. In the background to the right are the Queen Anne style row houses he developed across Linden Street in 1888. The Queen Anne style brick, brownstone, and terracotta row houses that Meeker commissioned in 1888 represent an impressive section along the west side of Linden Street and facing Bushwick Avenue. 37 to 55 Linden Street were designed by Brooklyn architect Frank Keith Irving, whose work is also represented in Crown Heights North 3 and Prospect Heights historic districts. This sophisticated row is particularly notable for its continuous bands of decorative terracotta, ornamental friezes, and parapets with ball finials. The high Victorian end house with its mansard roof, distinctive dormer windows, and roof cresting dramatically terminates the row. Numbers 21 to 35 Linden Street are brick and brownstone row houses designed in the neo-Breck style by Edward F. Gaylor, whose work is also found in Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood. Built in 1885, these row houses have all the typical neo-Breck details, such as incised shouldered lintels and bracketed sills, door hoods, and bracketed cornices. Many of the high stone stoops here retain the historic cast iron railings and oversized newel posts. Across Linden Street is an intact row of Renaissance revival, closest to Broadway, are brownstone row houses with Renaissance Revival details. These were built in 1901 and designed by Benjamin Finkencyper, who had immigrated from Germany in 1881. These houses feature projecting bays, tall stoops, rough-faced ashlar bases, string courses, and continuous cornices with decorative swag relief. Across the row is an intact row of Renaissance Romanesque Revival style row houses, every other one with an angled full-height projecting bay. Originally part of Samuel Meeker's holdings, they were sold after his death in 1891 and built from 1894 to 96. Architect and builder Charles E. Palmer combined two popular late 19th century styles in his design for this row, which features distinctive Romanesque rough-faced stone facades, Renaissance Revival style cornices, and generously sized front yards. All the stoops and most of the ornamental ironwork remain in place. The first residents along this section of Linden Street were predominantly middle and working class families employed in a variety of occupations, including merchants, clerks, musicians, tailors, and the like. After World War II, Bushwick's population decreased as many of the earlier residents moved away. And during turbulent years of 1970s and 80s, sections of Bushwick, like other areas of New York City, experienced decline and unrest that resulted in many lost buildings. In the 1990s and 2000s, government and community groups partnered to create new housing and improve services in the area. The neighborhood has since attracted an influx of new immigrants from Central and South America, the Caribbean, Asia, and the Middle East. Artists, musicians, young professionals, many of whom opened new businesses. Today, the Bushwick neighborhood has continued to experience ongoing revitalization, and Linden Street reflects the diversity and vitality of its surrounding neighborhood. Remarkably, this section has remained intact over the years, resulting in a consistent historic landscape. Linden Street between Bushwick Avenue and Broadway stands out as one of the architecturally and historically significant residential areas in Bushwick. It represents an impressive streetscape and illustrates the first wave of widespread row house settlement in the neighborhood. The characteristic architectural features of the various late 19th century styles add a pleasing variety while maintaining the continuity of scale and materials along the street. The research department recommends that the Landmarks Preservation Commission vote to designate Linden Street Historic District as a historic district. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Commissioners, do we have any questions for Kate or Marianne? Yes, Commissioner Chu, please go ahead.
I was just wondering, there is this empty lot that's on the south side of Linden before it hits Broadway. Marianne, do you know what that property, who the owner is, and what potentially could be built there?
I do not know who the owner is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Kate-
I think we
wanna
probably
answer?
have that. I don't have it handy.
Okay.
But there is a planned development.
There is a planned development right there.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? All right. I think I'm just delighted we're here at this point. This is, the staff has been doing survey work across all 5 boroughs and including in Bushwick, and should we vote to designate today, this designation would fulfill our goals of equitable representation in our designations throughout the 5 boroughs that highlight the city's diversity. And we've had great community support in this neighborhood. And, I'm really, again, delighted that we're here in the process. Staff has worked very hard on considering this historic district. This would be the first historic district in Bushwick. And we have, of course, done other survey work here. And this represents the earliest, a collection of the earliest development of row houses in this neighborhood. And I think it's a great place for us to start here. Any other thoughts? Yes, Commissioner Goldblum.
Yeah, thank you. I want to address the issue of the boundary of the district. I wouldn't question for a minute the appropriateness of the creation of the district around these historic houses, but I think that it's an interesting problem, and I understand why we do what we do, but I want to just say something in favor of a different way to look at it. This district is not about uniformity. There are 3 or 4 different architects. There's 3 or 4 different styles. It's a development over time that has created an atmosphere, a quality of life on the block, an aesthetic experience of the block as a unity. And I think if that is the kind of framing of the idea of a district, then I think that the drawing of the boundaries so tightly around the brownstones is not reflective of the actual reality of the experience of the block. I think that the apartment buildings on the opposite side of the street, the vacant lot at the end, these are all usually, the way New York works, I think, is the avenues have different scales, and then that different scale, usually more intense, creates a kind of intimacy to the mid-block condition. And I think that the mid-block condition really starts at, from the one lot in all the way. And I think that by leaving those lots out merely because they're either undeveloped or developed slightly differently is a mistake, because it risks it jeopardizes the notion of the block as a kind of architectural and experiential unit. So I would urge the research department to consider that. We have lots of districts that have non-contributing lots, which would allow for modification of what's going on there. But I think if the unit of that is the block, I think we should designate the block.
Okay, I know you did express this at the hearing as well, and and I know that you understand the thinking behind the work that we do. Boundaries are, one of the most rigorously evaluated aspects of some of our research work here, and historic districts are designed or designated to protect and recognize architecturally and historically significant buildings through regulation. And so we regulate changes to protect historic building fabric. And so if there are undeveloped lots on the edge or non-contributing buildings on the edges, there, by definition, there really isn't historic fabric to be regulated. And we really, when we look at historic districts, want to include the buildings that together collectively create that sense of place. And I understand the sort of desire to try to curate the sense of place around the buffers, but we don't really look at buffers that way. In this case, the apartment buildings were built several decades later than the row houses on Linden Street and don't share their architectural quality. The row houses together tell an important story about Bushwick's early residential development. And that is something that sort of predates many of this, in Bushwick, there are many buildings of different periods, but much later row houses. And this particular collection has sort of three periods that speak to the earliest development in the neighborhood. Many historic districts have a combination of apartment buildings and row houses, and they tell different stories. And I think that just recently in the Dorrance Brooks Historic District, we designated two sections that together created a historic district that had a variety of building types, including row houses, tenement buildings, apartment buildings, institutional buildings. And together those buildings all contributed to the historic character and nature of the district. But it really is a little different on this street. These apartment buildings don't speak to the significance behind this block. And I think we are very careful about not overreaching and trying to designate non-contributing buildings at the edges of historic districts so that we have something that we're truly regulating and not sort of trying to deter development or curate future development where there isn't historic fabric. So I know it's a tricky thing, and we will continue to have many more similar discussions, I'm sure. Commissioner Ginsburg?
Yes, I would support what Chair Carroll says, and also say what Commissioner Goldblum is talking about is scale, which is controlled by the zoning resolution. And if there are issues with the zoning, that is another discussion, but I tend to be concerned about over designation of non-contributing buildings and think that that's an issue that should be looked at more from a city planning and zoning perspective than a landmarks perspective.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so if there are no other questions and comments, I would be delighted if we could make a motion to designate Commissioner Holford-Smith. Would you make that motion? Would you be comfortable making that motion?
I'd love to.
Thank you.
Just give me a sec to bring it up. Motion to designate Linden Street Historic District, Borough of Brooklyn. I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate the Linden Street Historic District, Borough of Brooklyn, as a New York City Historic District because it contains buildings and other improvements which have a special character and a special historic and aesthetic interest and value, and which represent one or more eras in the history of New York City, and which cause this area, by reason of these factors, to constitute a distinct section of the city. Further, this historic district is part of the development, heritage, and culture of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in the designation report for LP 2665, dated May 9th, 2023. I also move that the district be designated with the boundaries as described in the designation report and illustrated in the attached map.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
I second that motion.
Okay, and Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford-Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Thank you all so much. This is now our 156th historic district, and we're delighted to add Linden Street to our special places in New York City. Thank you all. All right, we'll now move to our Preservation Department public meeting agenda, and I'll turn it over to Corey Harala, the Director of Preservation.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting item number 1, LPC 22-10801. This is an application for a binding report. It's in the Borough of the Bronx, Block 2462, Lot 1, 1040 Grand Concourse, the Bronx Museum of the Arts, and also in the Grand Concourse Historic District. This is a museum originally built as a synagogue and community hall designed by Simon B. Zelnick and built in 1961. and later altered and expanded by Castro Blanco, Piccionary and Associates in 1988. The application is to demolish, alter, and redesign portions of the building and site. This was last presented at the public hearing of April 18th, 2023, and no action was taken at that time. The applicants will be presenting revisions to the proposal after we open the proceedings.
Let's open the proceedings now so we can have the applicant go ahead and speak right after the staff. So Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the applicants may speak when they're ready.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Anya, you now have control of the presentation. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. And the project team may begin, but please state your name for the record before you do so.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anya Ramirez, and I'm an architect at Marvel. And I will be presenting this morning alongside with Jonathan Marvel. Our adjustments and changes based on your comments during our initial hearing on April 18th. And I just want to do a very, very short refresher, although the initial stating it's what I'm about to say. Small refresher, the museum, the Bronx Arts Museum is located in the Grand Concourse Historic District, designated on 2011. And as it was mentioned, it was initially a synagogue by Simon Bell Selnick, updated an addition by Castro Blanco Piccionary in 1988, in which became the Bronx Museum of the Arts. And in 2006, the North Wing addition occurred with the architecture of Arquitectonica. Our goals remain the same: help craft a Bronx identity and a place of community at the museum, reimagine the museum experience, create an accessible circuit within the two buildings or the two wings that exist, make it adaptable for future growth, and the future awaits different changes in the arts, and design something that is to be built. On April 18th, we presented our project and we listened to you. There were some key comments and observations that we went back to the drawing board and reviewed with our client and the design team. And today we would like to focus on these 4 items. That was our takeaway from the last time. The Grand Concourse rhythm was an observation being brought on, and how our project was reacting to that. The brick materiality, both at the south wing and also the north wing, the south wall, how it was not really the right tone, and there was some questions on maintenance, which we hopefully will are addressing currently. There were some comments on the roof connectivity and in how it related to a north wing and the south administrative wing. And additionally, some questions on the paver design, which hopefully is something that brings the art closer to the sidewalk, which is one of our main concepts. I'm gonna let Jonathan Marvel start on how we are addressing these comments on this building that, although in a historic district, is not a contributing building. Jonathan? The microphone is all yours.
Thank you, Anya. My name is Jonathan Marvel, principal at Marvel, and good morning, Chair Carroll and commissioners. It's great to be back here to talk in more detail on those 4 topics, beginning with the rhythm of the Grand Concourse, which is so defined by a verticality of the Art Deco style, accenting the entrances to the buildings and symmetries that go along with the development of that period of time. Go to the next slide.
1 second, just thinking.
Thank you. And the Arquitectonica edition clearly responds to that verticality with their expressive aluminum and glazed vertical panels at a civic scale, much like the buildings that you saw in that previous image. We have taken that verticality to the pedestrian scale. And that's important to say, in that the rhythm of the GFRC panels, which are monumental to a certain degree. We made mock-ups of these. These are 4-foot by 12-foot panels stacked on top of each other. But they will create their own rhythm next to the mullions of the glazed storefront, which is an 8-foot rhythm and floor to ceiling, no horizontal. So underneath what we're filing as a marquee, the roof line extends beyond the property line, creating a marquee effect. And so that scales down to the pedestrian, and you'll appreciate the verticality of those panels and the glazed storefront, much like you do with the elements. Now I'll go into some detail on the entry. It's a recessed entry. We're hugging the property line with the storefront system and the GFRC panels extending beyond the property line with the cantilevered marquee roof. So the only place that we're indenting is at the entry. So it creates a kind of a triangular recess in its footprint. And that's where the front doors will be. And I think that'll also be highlighted as the intersection of the two roof lines, the overhead, which we're going to be overlapping even more so to kind of create that moment of interest and point of visibility, like here's the front door. It's also where the GFRC panels rise together. So all those visual cues will give you a remarkable entry point from which then you can go to the right to the project room, to the left to the food and beverage section, all part of the same entry gallery system that this project is underlying in its intent. Go to the next image. And now we can talk a little bit about the masonry that is on the flanking parts of the addition that we're creating. And the flanking parts to the right is the original synagogue brick, which is a golden tan quality, and that is it's a brick that we know it's there. We've done some probes. We know its color and texture, as well as the CMU masonry that's to the north. And you can see here the probes that we've made in the metal panel that Castro Blanco put on top of the brick. And if we go to the next image, we're going to be exploring a stain system to respond to the true colors and nature of the masonry in the neighborhood. The adjoining buildings are all brick, and here you can see a stain sample. We will be doing this on site, and you can see here examples from the manufacturer over a 20-year period. The maintenance has been fantastic in these the images that you see here provided to us by the manufacturer. So the staining itself is not it's not a coating that is going to shed water. It is actually a product that becomes absorbed by the brick itself and therefore has a much longer lasting, requiring no maintenance. And that's the coating that we're proposing on the CMU wall on the Northern Arquitectonica edition. And now we can talk a little bit about the roof line. There were, as I said, this is being filed with the Department of Buildings as a marquee. that allows us to go over the property line, allows us to create a strong shadow line. It allows the building to read as a corner component, marking its visibility on the Grand Concourse, not in its height, but in the drama of the changing roofline. I think this is where the museum can stand out in the neighborhood, much like the Guggenheim and the Whitney and so many other museums in the world are allowed to project themselves in a way that is heralding their cultural capacity to be the flag for the community. And here you can see the roof line on the northern gap. We are extending over the property line of this particular lot, and so we can create that point of intersection with our storefront system, making it a feature item. And if we go to around the corner to 165th Street, this is what you saw before, and we're now extending it to go beyond the storefront system, creating a shadow and highlighting the feature of the roof line in its way and how it's overlapping the masonry and connecting to the storefront system.
One more time.
Thank you, Anya. Okay. And finally, at the entry point, as I said, to make it visually highlighting for the pedestrian, giving you the cues, this is where the front door is. We're overlapping the roof lines even more to make that a dynamic point of interest, of visually, spatially marking the entry point as the kind of the highlight of your experience as you go from the sidewalk into the galleries. And I think the dynamic roof line speaks for itself as a way to message that this is the Bronx Museum of the Art, and it is open to the public and celebrating the cultural values and community of the Bronx and the city of New York. And the materiality of that roof is I think a very important topic. Its color comes from the Art Deco context. It's a brass fully. This is not a coated material. This is real brass with a percentage of copper, and it will have a brushed finish. It has a quality. Here's a sample with me. So it has, depending on the angle that you see it and the light on it, it can go from very light to very dark. But I think it'll capture that dynamic quality that we're looking for. It captures the hues of the Grand Concourse and its warmth and its color. And I think that the Arquitectonica edition does its statement in its verticality and its color in a dynamic way, and we wanted to create a parallel with that in offsetting and doing it in a slightly different way, but with that same element of dynamism and celebration that the museum acts in its role in the cultural corridors of the Bronx. Thank you very much.
Wait, one more.
But one more.
This is lagging a little bit, so my apologies. Okay, here.
And thank you. The paving that we had discussed, we're removing some planters that obscure the building's facade, and replacing them with a Nassau brick paving system that's 4 by 8 inches, and it'll be in a running bond pattern along the 165th Street corridor with a distinctive capacity to host a bronze plaques that we'd like to offer the donors of the museum, as well as artistic and poetic statements that can be done over time, allowing the sidewalk to speak to the cultural context, making it a pedestrian-friendly, curated capacity to celebrate both the donors and the artistic intent of the museum. Again, celebrating the sidewalk as much as possible in that pedestrian experience. Now, here's our concluding image. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for your second presentation on the goals of this project. Commissioners, do we have any comments or questions, I mean? We'll move to comments in a minute. Yes, Commissioner Chu, please go ahead.
Yes, I didn't hear what the material of the roof metal was. Sorry, could you repeat that?
Thank you. It's a solid bronze material with a percentage of copper inside of it, and it'll have a orbital brushed finish, so it's fairly easy to install as a roofing system. It'll not only be on the underside of the roof, but the fascia as well as the top part. So when you look down on this roof from the neighboring buildings, you'll see that same color, and it has that a capacity to be light and reflective and warm all at the same time.
Is it sealed so that it, in terms of weathering,
yes,
I imagine it will weather?
Yeah, it is sealed.
Okay. And it comes up around the coping and laps over to the gutter behind it. Is that the detail there?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand
Sure.
the roof, which I think is quite a nice expression. In roof plan, I was looking at one of your drawings that showed the sidewalk flaring so that it became wider as you approach the intersection. Does the roof in fact cantilever more as you move towards the intersection, so it increases its cantilever towards the corner?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Ever so slightly, but it does.
Ever slightly, yeah.
Right. Last question, sorry, because this is really, to me, a lot about this nice expression you've created with the roof line, is the relationship it has to the Arquitectonica building, the vertical side. Are you creating like a reveal there? I see on the other side of the existing building, there's quite a nice overlap of the fabric of the existing to the new. On this side, is that just as if it's coming out of the lot and the verticality is respected on that building?
I'm getting to that slide.
Yeah.
That side, right, yeah.
Oh, 1 second.
Oh,
And there's a detail image of that.
that's right.
And we're not extending it into the zone of the the Arquitectonica building. We're really respecting that that the offset. We are cantilevering it over ever so slightly over our storefront to keep that language active in its relationship of storefront to roofline, but we are not extending it into the plane of the Arquitectonica system.
Okay, so when the roof ends here and I look below it, I see a faint line. Is that a new panel that's up against the existing facade on the left?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you
Thank
have
you.
it flush or recessed here? It looks like it's flush.
It's flush. It's flush.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so I think we'll move to our discussion, commissioners. So I'm going to ask you all to unmute yourselves so we can begin that discussion. And, the last time we saw this, I think everyone noted, oh, Commissioner Jefferson, did you have a question?
Yes, I had a question about the composition uniting the three buildings, and the roof is that element that connects the three buildings. And what is the connection? One is an overlap on the existing building on the south side, And the other one is a penetration. What is the architectural connection to them other than the roof slope?
Thank you. The connectivity is important in that it is deferential on the north side to the Arquitectonica building. It starts at a 12-foot height, the roof, and ascends to the corner at 32 feet. So we're being deferential to the Arquitectonica building, which has a strong horizontal marking its doorway system. And by starting at a deferential height, that's our way of saying we're picking up that horizontal blade that marks their front door to that building, and then we're going up from there with that stepping to mark our entry point. So that's a play off of, I think, the canopy marquee notion that exists in a subtle way on the Arquitectonica facade, and then becomes our celebration. And then as it turns the corner, as you pointed out, it overlaps with the masonry building on 165th Street by about 4 or 5 feet, and increasing that kind of statement to say this is a building that's still part of the Bronx Museum campus. You may not know that otherwise.
Thank you. Makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and Vice Chair Bland?
As we all know, most successful, certainly, museums tend to grow over time. I'm just wondering, Jonathan, is there a specific idea about a next phase for growth of this building, or will we?
Yeah, I can't say that it's specific, other than that the block and lots that the museum has at its disposal, there will be a future growth phase on the northeastern lots, and there's substantial FAR that the museum has, and so there will definitely be a future phase. It'll be a taller phase, that taller structure than the perhaps not increasing in height because of zoning than the buildings around, but I think that and we have planned for that, I believe, by making this integral color roof wrapping around so that you can look down on a dynamic folded plate roof from that future addition.
So just to clarify, the addition would or would not be on top of or set behind your sloping roof?
It'll be not on top of, it'll be on behind. There's an empty parking lot, and there's some,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that this sloping roof, which is becoming certainly an icon in this moment, is not compromised a lot, at least in the future build out. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I think we'll move to our discussion now. And I think, as I was saying, when we saw this last time, I think every commissioner present did recognize the importance of this museum, this institution, to not only the neighborhood and the historic district and the Bronx, but also to the city. And really, I think everybody commended the goals of the creating dynamism, engaging the streetscape, ensuring and achieving inclusivity by welcoming people in, and that was sort of a driving force behind the idea of opening up the corner. And so I think there was a lot of support for the institution and for the design approach. In particular, 6 commissioners, I think, really were comfortable with the design as it was presented, but did ask for some clarification on the paint and the stain colors on the other 2 buildings. And a couple of other commissioners asked for some more explanation or revision to the overhang to help with the connectivity among the buildings. And then there were a couple of other thoughts. So I'm going to start with those of us who were supportive last time. And I'll start with Vice Chair Bland. I think last time you definitely thought it was an interesting response to this eclectic corner of 3 distinct buildings. And I think you were thought it was great that it brought dynamism and this expression of inclusion, but you did mention the white stain and the white gray paint, and wondered if those should be toned down. And you also raised the opportunity of using the sidewalk.
Unbelievably, I remember all of those comments. Often you forget between hearings. No, I was very effusive in my praise of this approach. Very unusual, I think, custom sort of approach that that only really significant architects can give a project like this. It's not something that would be predictable, I think, and therein lies its brilliance. So I'm completely supportive now, even more so than I was. I think the elimination of the super white color is the right thing to do. It actually just helps the whole blending of the campus, even though distinctly 3 different are still involved. But the overriding bronze upper roof is an inspired way, and the slope of that roof breaking, but still nodding to the context of the concourse, as Jonathan was explaining, not unlike the Whitney on Madison Avenue or the Guggenheim on Fifth Avenue, which was also included in Jonathan's explanation. I think this is doing the same thing with the same kind of overriding reason and rationale and appropriateness. So I'm quite happy with what I see. So,
all right, great, thank you. Commissioner Chen, did you have an additional question?
Just whether you need to close the hearing or not.
Oh, no, the hearing is closed. We only opened the proceedings, but thank you
right.
for thinking of
Thank
that. Okay. All right, Commissioner Ginsburg, I think you also felt it was an appropriate design and approach for handling the 3 distinct buildings on the campus, and also had questions about those paint colors and stain color.
And I think I agree with Commissioner Bland, and agree also that if anything, going back and relooking at this has created an improved design. So I'm ready to approve it.
Okay, great, thank you. Actually, Commissioner Chen, I'll call on you next because you were also fairly supportive last time, thought it was a very successful approach. And you particularly noted that cultural institutions often stand out in their neighborhoods and make a statement, and that this makes a very welcoming and dynamic statement, an inclusive statement. So how are you feeling with the changes?
Yeah, just like Vice Chair Bland, this is even better because this is really a work in progress. I'm looking forward to the next phase when they flank the right hand side on the screen. That will make it even more dynamic. And so well done.
Great, thank you. All right, Commissioner Chapin, you also felt it was a successful approach to connect the 3 buildings in the campus and supported the roof line, but you also had questions about those light white colors. And so are you feeling comfortable at this point?
Yes, I think that the color works much better and is connecting it nicely, I think now. And I also think that the small changes to the roof line actually are, an improvement and help to better integrate the 2 campuses. So
that's great. Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Master, I think you also were in the group of commissioners who were pretty happy and felt that the approach was very successful and how it engaged the corner and raised interest at the corner. I think you also particularly felt the copper was a very warm color that would relate well in the district. And so how are you feeling now?
So I liked the design the first time I saw it. On review, I like it even better. I love it. I think that they were really able to accomplish a lot of their goals. I like the way that they took the gray on that wall rather than the white. It was distracting. And I think having the gray in all three buildings also kind of ties it together. I love the small improvements that they made, especially the brick paving system. I think it's fantastic, and I can't wait to visit once they renovate it.
Thank you. All right, and Commissioner Jefferson, you, I think, also felt the composition was strong and held the corner. You were the commissioner, one of the commissioners who asked them to consider studying the roof line to better connect the three buildings. And so in response to those comments, they've treated the ends of the overhang differently, and have also treated, I think you also were worried that the entrance wasn't prominent enough, and they've addressed the overlap to make that entrance more prominent. So how are you feeling now?
I think the explanation of the roof and the way it looks now is much improved. And I love the way it ties the composition together. And the gray is an interesting issue where they changed from white to gray. It does hold the composition together. The planes, the surfaces tie together. The only issue, and it's a small one, a tiny one, is that right now there's in the new building, there's which is dominant, the wall or the roof. There seems to be a struggle between visually, which is stronger, but that's something they could resolve later. But in terms of a composition of three buildings, it works very well.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, and Commissioner Holford Smith, I think last time you had some concerns about the verticality in along the Grand Concourse and how this sort of horizontal plane would relate to it. And I don't know if the changes to the roof line have sort of addressed some of those concerns for you.
I mean, not really.
Okay.
So I think that while I might not think this is the most appropriate solution here, I certainly can't find it inappropriate. So I think that the change from the white stain to a more of a gray color definitely helps to unify the three buildings. I would have hoped for a little more verticality in the design, but I can appreciate, you know, their sort of vision for this building. And like I said, if I don't mind, I'd find it the most appropriate in this location. I'm not going to find it inappropriate either.
Okay, thank you. I think, you know, it is already a low slung building. So
Yep.
I think it's
a huge improvement over what's there now. No doubt.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, you also had concerns about it being a sort of a horizontal plane in this particular district, in this particular streetscape.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm pretty much where I was last time. I really think that raising the issue of the Whitney and the Guggenheim is very interesting. I think that they work in their locations because they are objects within a context, within a fabric. This addition acts as its own object in a context. It doesn't draw the other two buildings together, I don't think, in an effective way. I think that it's an interesting object. It's an object that's well designed, but I don't think it responds to the location either on the concourse or amidst these two other very different buildings. So I'm still, you know, much as I wish them the best and much as I love this institution and feel that it deserves an excellent addition, and as much as it is a great improvement over what's there, I just don't think it's an appropriate modification in this district, in this location. I think that the same issues that I had last time still remain in terms of the verticality, the depth of the incursions, the rhythm, you know, I really, I cannot support it as it is, even though I think it is an interesting design. I just don't think it's appropriate to this location or this district.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chu, you weren't present for the initial presentation, but I know you reviewed the revised presentation carefully and you had some interesting questions. So having seen the revised presentation and heard the other commissioners speak, I wonder what your thoughts are at this point.
I think that it's a skillful design that Mr. Marvel's firm has created here. I do see the gestures that they were seeking, which is transforming the architectonica, almost folding plane verticality into a horizontal language as you move along that north side. I do like the sort of the revisions to the materiality. I can imagine there being a lot of nice movement on the texture of those GFRC panels. I think that there's a lot of effort I can see to bring this corner to more of a human scale, which I think is quite successful. My comment, overall, I like the design and I support this very contemporary, welcoming approach to this corner. The only comments that I do have is I do see an integration to some extent on the right side of this image to the existing brick volume, but on the left I do feel a little bit abrupt by the roof line and the verticality there, and that's why I was asking those questions. I do feel that if the approach is to be a separate structure adjacent, then maybe that could be more clearly defined as such. I can see that there is a very clearly horizontal canopy on the architectonica building as you approach, which is addressing human scale. And this is in some ways celebrating that move to a more heroic gesture, which I appreciate. I just feel that that corner isn't as nuanced as it could be. And I'm sure Mr. Marvel is skilled and can look at that. The other comments I have are about my experience on the sidewalk looking up, because I see a lot of effort to light, even in the evening, the roof underside, and bring that roof expression interior to the lobby spaces. And I couldn't quite understand the patterning of those panels on the big corner. And I think that's something that could be just clarified in some drawings to understand. Does that become a grid as opposed to the more directional patterns I see on the north side bar building? I'm just going to speak out. I wonder some things, and you know, I'm not trying to play designer. I'm just looking at this as an image, and I wonder if the angled lift on the lower volume on the left here, if that were more, I don't know, it looks like the two roofs may be at different slopes already. If that were maybe less of an incline driving down to the blank wall and architectonica, that might help. If there was some horizontality that might continue and then bring you to a higher lift, there may be something there. But my sensibility is that it's not as successful in its meeting of the verticality on the left. Otherwise, I love the expression. I think that the metal will bring, it's a nice way to bring the warmth to this corner that the brick buildings all have in a way that's a little bit sparkly. I think it needs to be in a finish that's not too reflective and maybe matted down a little bit, but that will have some character that could bring a nice sense of materiality to that corner. Natural materials, I know it's GFRC, not stone, which would probably be prohibitively expensive, but I understand the gesture. And I think ultimately I would like to see the real the mix for that GFRC, what the color, what the makeup is.
Okay, all right, thank you. And you know, as the final color samples will of course be reviewed by staff, and so we can bring anything to your attention that you're interested in seeing as we go through that process. But today, I think we do have 6 commissioners who support the project as is. And we have, I think, two other commissioners who have thought of some ideas that the architect can continue to think about as they develop their final drawings. Particularly at that connection that you were just talking about, Commissioner Chu, between the end of the overhang and the Architectonica building, and that may also, in a way, sort of address Commissioner Jefferson's sort of question about the tension between facade and roof prominence. But I think we have enough to approve it today. We'll go ahead and do that. And if the architect would like to continue to think about some of those thoughts as they continue to develop the project, we welcome that. So I'll go ahead and make this motion.
Chair Carol, can I just make a minor, just a comment? And I think this is something that can also be worked on with the staff. But because the roof is such an important element to this design, I find myself wanting to know more about the detail of the vertical fascia on that, and I'm sure that the team is skilled at these details. I'm convinced that they can work with the staff to just create something that has a sense of delicateness at that edge, because it is a big roof, it is a big overhang, and adding a level of detail at that edge might give it a level of refinement that will make it a little bit sharper and more crisp.
Okay,
that's it.
All right, thanks. Okay, so I'll go ahead and make this motion in the matter of LPC 22-10801, 1040 Grand Concourse, the Bronx Museum of the Arts, the Grand Concourse Historic District, a museum originally built as a synagogue and community hall designed by Simon and Zelnick and built in 1961 and later altered and expanded by Castroblanco Piccionary and Associates in 1988. This is an application to demolish, alter, and redesign portions of the building and site. And I note that the Bronx Museum of the Arts has grown over time into a complex of buildings designed by multiple architects and designers and spanning multiple lots. The first structure on the site was the synagogue and community hall, and the city later purchased the lot for the museum, and the structure was altered and expanded. And the museum was further expanded with the construction of 1046 Grand Concourse, a contemporary style new building designed by Architectonica Bernardo Forbrescia and Lorinda Spear, and built in 2002, 2000 to 2006, which is located on the adjacent lots 6 and 8. And I also note that the Grand Concourse Historic District is located on a 1-mile stretch of the Grand Concourse consisting of apartment houses, 2 parks, and several public institutions. And I recommend that that the commission issue a positive report finding that the Grand Concourse Historic District features many singular institutional and cultural buildings that do not share a typical style, that the proposed work will not obscure or destroy any significant architectural feature of the buildings or the site, that the museum complex is the result of several building expansion campaigns varying in age, type, and scale that addressed the evolving programmatic needs of the museum, and that the proposed work is in keeping with the layered architectural character and historic evolution of the site as a museum, that the work will address current programmatic objectives, including providing barrier-free access, expanding the galleries, improving interior circulation, and blurring the boundaries between interior and exterior zones through larger windows to draw more people into the museum, that the existing structure with its dark color palette and undefined entrance does not engage with the public, that the site was developed in 3 phases without a unified appearance, and that the proposed work will help to tie the complex together by creating a focal point at the corner of the site and an opportunity to emphasize the new primary entrance, that the form and porosity of the new design, featuring a prominent prow at the corner shaped by a folding overhanging roof, will relate to the architectural expression of the modern building in the complex while introducing a glassy open curtain wall at the street wall that visually connects the interior and exterior of the building, that the proposed design effectively emphasizes and anchors the corner of the site, and the overhang roof extends beyond the boundary of the new addition to embrace the corner of the synagogue and visually connect these two buildings. That the proposed bronze alloy material of the roof with a finish that prevents it from anodizing recalls and harmonizes with the color of the reddish brown bricks at other buildings in the historic district, that the removal of the dark metal panels from the former synagogue walls and staining of the brickwork, as well as staining of the concrete block at the side wall of the modern addition and the proposed light gray GFRC panel cladding of the new facade will help to visually unify the different buildings on the site. That the proposed sidewalk treatment in front of the former synagogue building where planters will be removed will feature decorative stone pavers with bronze inserts that will complement the complex and create a forecourt, and that the proposed work will support the architectural character of the Grand Concourse Historic District. And I also recommend that the applicant continue to work with the staff as they finalize the development and refining the details. All right, Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Nay.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you so much. And we look forward for the work to begin and be completed and the creation of this addition to this great institution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to the next item.
The next item is public meeting item number 2, LPC 23-02712. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of the Bronx, block 2285, lot 75, 427 East 140th Street in the Mott Haven East Historic District. This is a Romanesque revival, Renaissance revival style row house designed by Walter H.C. Hornum and built in 1897 to 1900. The application is to construct rear yard and rooftop additions, construct a connecting building on a portion of the lot, and excavate a portion of the rear yard. This was last presented at the public hearing of March 28th, 2023, and no action was taken at that time. The applicants will present their revisions to the proposal after we open the proceedings.
Okay, and we'll go ahead and do that now. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. The proceedings are open and the applicant may speak.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Eric, you now have control of the presentation. You can advance the slides using your perfect. Please state your name for the record and you may.
Thank you. I'm Eric Safian from Eric Safian Architect PC, and I'm with my colleague, Kevin Kaler. Hello. I'd like to have the owner, Josh Dardashtian, just do a quick intro statement, and then I'll come back and go through the design updates.
Hi, good morning. I'm Josh Dardashtian. Thank you for allowing for us to present here again today. We've carefully considered all of your assessments and recommendations, and we've modified the new building in a way that enables it to better mesh the fabric of the block, and it substantially improves the building as a whole. We're very heavily invested in this neighborhood, and this project specifically is an exciting opportunity to build much needed, relatively affordable option for individuals and families to own within their community. So thank you again. And with that, I'd like to pass it back to our architects.
Okay, thank you, Josh. And thank you, Chair Carroll and commissioners, for this opportunity to reflect and update according to your comments. I'd like to start with a sort of a brief outline of the design updates we've proposed to this infill row house building. We've definitely, considering your comments, we've taken on the approach of a standalone new building that is infilling this available vacant lot rather than a extension to adjacent historic building. And with this new building design, we've attempted to be respectful and differential to the adjacent historic building as well as the historic row that we're a part of. The facade is designed as a single row house with more contemporary brick detailing. We've modified the bay window feature from the previous sort of wedge proposal, and we added some cornice articulation, and we think as a whole this better incorporates into the fabric and context of the entire block, not just the historic row, but the rectory structure on the right as well. And then just to go through a few of the design points, which I'll get into in the slides, we've taken our previous sort of triangular wedge shape that was the full height of the building, and we've modified that back to a two-story bay structure or bay feature that has a more minimal protrusion and presence, and we feel that blends in with the context of the block and the adjacent buildings. Secondly, we've modified the upper roof by removing the previously proposed dormer that had a cement board material, and we replaced it with a more setback mansard roof with further setback windows. We adjusted the color of the roofing itself from a zinc to we think a more appropriate rust brown color. And overall, we feel like we've created this setback with this sort of a solid void dynamic where the existing structure creates a solid with the existing historic dormer, and we've taken more of a subdued yet complementary role in setting back our windows as more of a void in relation to the historic structure. We've also increased the cornice height so it matches better with both sides of with both buildings on either side, and introduced some additional brick detailing that allows for the cornice to protrude out further. We've updated the windows from casements to a double hung, and we've also restored the original floor plate by of the existing structure by removing the proposed 5-foot extension at the top floor, and basically maintaining the interior historic court outline or the donut as is customary for landmarks. So I'd like to start just to reintroduce a little context. We've sort of zoomed in on the block and the historic row itself, along with the two church structures. You'll see our lot here is this vacant portion of the last lot, which is the last structure in this historic row, which was built by the developer Gorman and the architect Walter Hornum. As per the landmarks designation report, we've sort of drawn out the row pattern in relation to the heights, and while there is some patterning in the middle of the row, you could see here how it starts with a full 4-story structure, and then as the first building in the row, then it comes down to a 3-story structure with plus basement with a bay, and sort of cascades back to the street line, for which you then have a CCD, CCE, and then finally CCF pattern, for which we're creating our sort of standalone infill row house that Also afterwards, just to reiterate that the rectory structure to the left of the church, those were built after this historic row. So we feel like our proposal is now more respectful in addressing the entire block in its context. And you can see here with our previous massing compared to our updated massing, again, that full height wedge and protruding dormer were updated to a more setback approach to the upper floor and a 2-story rather than a 4-story wedge. We created a 2-story bay that has as part of its articulation, it starts flat, the bay comes out, and then it ends as another flat surface before and becomes flush with the adjacent building to the right. You could see here in the front plan the previous wedge. We've definitely took to heart some of the comments where, while we were trying to create a frame, we were essentially in a way that the wedge was turning its shoulder or turning its back on the rectory structure. So as I mentioned, we aligned both sides of that facade and created an infill sort of standalone row design with a less kind of a less protruding bay, 2-story bay structure here. You can see here the main differences between our original and proposed. You can see on the 3rd floor and on the roof. So the 3rd floor, the existing building is kept intact, and there's a terrace there as opposed to the previous extension. We've also set back to where the front windows are approximately 5 feet from the face of the adjacent building. And then you could see that reflected in the roof plan as well, where you have the sort of window setback, and then we've set the railing back further to try to lessen that presence a little bit more. The rear massing shows the updated, showing the existing rear floor as the original floor plate. So we reduced the extension by 1 floor. And just to kind of remind of the context, that the green is the historic row. It starts with the original, with the first building in the row already having a 5-foot full height setback, and then with us ending as the last. And then you could see that the church and rectory buildings, and then the multifamily housing beyond that are also in the district, really start to just go much deeper into the interior court. Just updated section sightline study. You could see the rear setback in section through the existing building. Here's as far as the updated facade, we just to kind of touch on some of the elements. The previous, we had a protruding dormer, which we eliminated in favor of raising the cornice so it matches the adjacent cornices and horizontal lines of the historic structure. We've created some more uniformity and switched to double hung so that it reads more as a historic, row house within the lot. And you can see the base structure is now just a two-story protrusion, with both sides of the facade being flush with their adjacent buildings. The brick we've chosen, just to kind of reiterate, it picks up on the historic row, and it's a Norman style brick. Sorry, excuse me, Roman style brick that is elongated and smaller height, and we feel like we've while being respectful of the row, we were trying to create a contextual yet contemporary detailing with brick. And we've also chosen the same brick, but the rusticated version of that brick for the base, also just to kind of align with the rustication that's found in the adjacent structure and the row itself. Here's the updated rear facade, where you could see the third floor of the existing structure being set back, and basically the existing brick corbelling detail, we're restoring the facade. The three windows are existing, and then the extension happens at the new building portion to the left. This is our previous render, showing again that full height wedge approach, where you could see there's overlap to the adjacent rectory building. And here's our sort of massing line drawing version of our proposed, where we really tried to scale down and be more appropriate within the fabric of the block, while creating contextual yet contemporary detailed building as a standalone design. And just here would like to end on the updated render. I think you can really see the just again to reiterate some of the design features, the solid void accentuating the setback, yet still kind of complementing the adjacent, raising and articulating the cornice through the brick detailing so that it aligns better with both buildings. You could see the just the way the brick detailing, the bay starts with vertical brick banding, and it sort of peels away from the facade, then comes back flush before it before reaching the adjacent building. So there's a flush alignment throughout the block. And again, just to touch on the rusticated base and the more contemporary brick detailing, while yet maintaining a respectful and deferential role within the block as an infill row house project. So thank you very much for.
Great, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg, please go ahead.
So I was not here for the first hearing, so if I'm asking repeat questions, please forgive me. I understand why you went to double hung, but did you look at going to something like two awnings or an awning over a fixed because they're more energy efficient? And then the second question is, are you doing anything above the energy code electrification as part of this project?
We're not proposing at this time, we're basically conforming to the latest 2022 energy code, which, as you know, is they're becoming pretty effective on each further version. For the windows, we plan to just match the energy code, and I can discuss with the owner the possibility of we've done casements that look like double hungs before to achieve a tighter seal. We're certainly open to that.
And this will be a fully electric building, if that was part of the question.
Yes, that was part of the question.
It will be.
and
There won't be
thank you.
gas in the building.
Thank you, Josh.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson. Just accept the request to unmute. Yeah.
I have two questions. I don't quite understand the excavation in the rear yard. And if you could go to the plans that you have, if you could explain how much of the rear yard is being excavated and how does it work? Is that an apartment down there, or is that what happens there? Yeah, that piece. The excavate, go back to PM5, I think would be the one. Section, go to the section. Yeah, here. What happens at this? You're only excavating that lower level there. Is that what is that for?
That's to bring in some light to the cellar level, which, if you look at the plan, is a actually we had the cellar level, excuse me for that, we had the cellar level on our initial presentation, and then currently we presented basement through roof, but we are proposing to excavate
so maybe this is a good.
below grade at that level.
Okay, so that's the basement level. Okay, thank you. The second question, if you could go back to your page number 9, the last page that you had, the final rendering you had, this one, and strange design decision. The railing. Why the railing? Why not just take it all the way up? I mean, it's a beautiful composition you did here, but the railing seems so different or anomaly to this thing. Why the railing?
Why the railing versus taking the mansard roof up to the full height? Is that the question?
Correct. Yes.
Essentially the one sentence answer is in deference to the historic structure. We try to create a sort of respectful cousin, so to speak. So in a series of moves, you could see that we set back the mansard roof from the historic roof. We've set back the windows, and we've also, while creating a railing, we've also set that railing back an additional 2 feet. So there is less of a presence. So there's less sort of iron, vertical presence on that. So yeah, I think we'd be open to.
Well, no, that's just a question.
Yeah.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? All right, we may be ready to move to our discussion then. All right, so commissioners, I'm sending you all requests to unmute. And I do want to note for the record that the Historic Districts Council did send a letter in with comments about the revised design, which was shared with all of the commissioners in advance of today's public meeting. And so I'll kick off the discussion and just note that the last time we saw this, I think all commissioners really applauded filling in this gap in the street wall, providing new housing units in this historic district, and also the supporting the sort of community-based ownership plan here. So I think everyone sort of lauded the goals of this project, and many were generally fine with the overall size of the building, but did have suggestions about the architectural expression of the building, particularly the angled facade. And I think many of the comments also centered around whether this building wanted to be read as part of the row or as an addition to a building in this row, or as a standalone building that's deferential to the streetscape and responsive to the streetscape. And so the applicants have come back today and I think have expressed their design approach here as to design a standalone building in this streetscape that relates harmoniously with the row to the left and the rectory and the church to the right. And they've made a number of changes, including eliminating the angled facade and doing a bay that returns back to a planar wall that is coplanar with the rectory, setting back the mansard roof and simplifying it to also be deferential within the streetscape. So we'll begin our discussion, and I'll start with Commissioner Goldblum. I think the last time you saw this, you really felt that angled facade was creating an end block condition that was not appropriate within the mid block. And I think felt that if it was an addition to the row, it should respect the AAB pattern and rhythm of the row. And that but that if a standalone building, there would be more leeway. And I think in terms of the overall depth of the building, you felt that was fine in this context, but that the rear yard addition of the existing building needed to be reduced by one floor. So I think those were generally your comments. And so I wonder how you're feeling now after seeing the revised proposal.
I'm feeling great. I think that the changes were thoughtful and incisive. They were not extensive, but they were enough to take the character of the original design, which was quite nice and involved an interesting level of detail in the brickwork, has been maintained. And at the same time, the project now fits into its mid-block context much better. I agree with Everardo that the top is a bit peculiar, but they could work with staff on that to either set the railing back further so that it just does not appear, or to extend the mansard up to cover it. It would be okay for me. I think the rear modulation of the massing is much more successful. I think this is an appropriate scheme, and I again thank the applicant for this very important project. May there be many more of them.
Great, thank you so much. All right, and Commissioner Chapin, I think you had very similar comments. You specifically felt that the size and height of the proposed building was acceptable, and that a design that's sort of modern and contextual with the row and the rectory would also be an appropriate approach. I think you liked the brick, and did I think specifically ask them to think about setting back the mansard and being a little more subordinate and deferential. So how have the changes today addressed your comments?
I agree with Commissioner Goldblum. I think that the treatment now of the mansard effect is, really much better, and using the bays. I agree with him that, and Commissioner Jefferson about the railing, that maybe it needs to be set back or else extend the mansard, one or the other. But I think it's really quite successful, and I appreciate they cut a floor off in the back next to the row. And I think also the heavier cornice is a plus. So I think all of the changes have made it much more successful from my point of view and very approvable.
Right, great, thank you. All right, and Commissioner Holford Smith, I think you had similar comments that the rectory is in the same plane of the row houses, and you really wanted the angle to not interrupt that planar relationship. You also, I think, thought that the mansard could be set back and the top volume could be restudied. I think you also did appreciate the double hung windows, which would relate to the row, and I think suggested the double hung windows, and also suggested reducing the rear yard addition by a floor. So I think many of those comments have been addressed, but let's see how they worked for you in terms of your concerns.
I think it's much improved. I think that now the building holds a relationship to the entire row where it didn't before. I like the angled bay. It's very reminiscent of a West Village project by Hugh Hardy.
Yeah.
But I think it works really well here. I think the brick detailing is very nice. And I think the double hung scale of the windows is much more appropriate. And I appreciate Commissioner Ginsburg's suggestion of a tighter casement type window, which I know that they do make in a double hung looking configuration. I also agree with Commissioner Jefferson's comment about the mansard. The railing is very distracting. I think either raising it or pushing the railing back would be an improvement. And I think the recessed top floor at the rear is much better in keeping with the adjacent buildings in the back. So all in all, a very good project.
Okay, great, thank you. Right, and Commissioner Chu, I think you also had very similar comments about the planar relationships between the row houses and the row, that the top floor proportions and expression needed to be restudied. You thought asymmetry was okay, but that entire facade being canted needed to be rethought. And also, I think, thought about setting back the top floor, and both on the front of the new building as well as eliminating the top floor of the rear yard addition. And so how have these changes addressed your concerns?
Yes, and I do want to compliment the applicant for the revisions and listening to the commissioner's comments and making basically a redesign to the facade. And I do think that their revisions have all improved the design. I think that the street face brick masonry facade is respected, which then allow for a little bit of a playful bay window expression here. And I think by setting that up, you've created a facade that I feel much more comfortable with, and I think this is an appropriate design.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, and Commissioner Jefferson, I think you also had thoughts about the planar relationships and the height of the rear yard additions, and maybe on the windows as well, and wanting to see something more like a traditional window and with a double hung. So how have these changes addressed your concerns?
He's taking care of all those issues. And what I have to commend him about is the scrutiny and care in developing this facade, and the modern idea of just cutting that angle plane to make a modern bay window, and just the dialogue between those two makes it quite special.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, and Commissioner Chen, I think you were here last time as well, and I think had similar comments about really figuring out whether it should be a new building or an addition, and that design changes would adapt accordingly. So how are you feeling today?
I agree with the commissioner's comments. I think this is much improved. I especially like the fact that the articulation on the rooftop, setting it back, and I think it has come a long way. I think the proportion and the scale is much better than last time.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, and Vice Chair Bland, I don't think you were here last time for this item, but having heard all of the presentation and the discussion, have you got thoughts on this?
Yep, apparently MIA last time. I haven't seen this before. But it's a very interesting challenge, and I think what's happened now, regardless of the fact that I didn't see it initially, is a very contextual infill, but clearly a contemporary expression as well. So without going into all the details, other than the railing on the top should not be so visible. Otherwise, I can support it along the lines that other commissioners have detailed more fully than I will.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, you also were not here, but you've heard the discussion today. And what are your thoughts?
Correct. And I can support it, and I agree with a number of commissioners' comments on the railing.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Master, I think you also were not present for this last time.
I agree with the other commissioners' comments, and I can support this as well.
Okay. All right. So I think we have a consensus to approve with the condition that they study that top of the parapet or / railing of the mansard, either setting the railing back or extending the mansard. So Commissioner Goldblum, would you make the motion?
Sure.
Thank you.
Regarding 427 East 140th Street in the Mott Haven East Historic District, the application is to construct rear yard and rooftop additions, construct a connecting building on a portion of the lot, and excavate a portion of the rear yard. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and sales are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Mott Haven East Historic District extension. I also note that the historic house is at the end of a row of houses, that the vacant portion of the lot is adjacent to the St. Peter's German Evangelical Lutheran Parsonage and Church, and that the front facade of the parsonage aligns in plane with the front facades of all the buildings in this row. I recommend approval, finding that the side wall of the historic building is undesigned, and the construction of a new building on the vacant portion of the lot, which connects to the historic building, will not eliminate or obscure any significant architectural features of this historic building or lot. That the construction of the new connecting building will fill in a gap in the street wall, that the cornice line of the connecting building will align with that of the historic building and will be in keeping with the cornice lines found in other buildings in the row. That the use of a sloped roof with inset windows to the top floor, recalling the form of a mansard roof, and designed in a contemporary manner, will be compatible with the roof line of the historic building and the proposed sloped roof, which is lower in height than the adjacent mansard roof and slightly set back from the front facade, will allow the mansard of the historic building to remain prominent. That the design and materiality of the connecting building, featuring decorative patterned red Roman brick with punched openings and dark metal windows, will harmonize with the materiality and articulation of the historic building and row. That the floor levels and windows of the connecting building will align with the historic building, and that the slightly sunken basement level entrance will allow for barrier-free access for the new apartments. That the proposed metal 1/1 double-hung windows with a dark painted finish will relate well to the historic fenestration of other buildings in the row. That projecting bays are features often found on row houses of this age and style, and that the proposed bay will create a visual dialogue with the adjacent buildings. That the design of the new areaway will feature a short ramp that will provide barrier-free access in the least intrusive manner possible. That the proposed rooftop stair bulkhead will not be visible directly over the front entrance and will be only minimally visible through rooftop guardrails at a distance from the west on 140th Street. That the simple design and neutral finish of the stucco-clad stair bulkhead and rooftop railings will give them a discrete secondary presence at the roof. The work at the rear of the buildings will not be visible from any public thoroughfare. That there is an existing partial width 1-story rear yard addition at the historic building, and the proposed full width rear yard addition will not project any further into the rear yard. That there are other larger buildings in the block that project deeper into the green space than the proposed rear yard addition, and that the footprint of the connecting building and the lower floors of the addition to the historic building will not diminish the character of the block's central green space. That the rear yard addition at the historic building will maintain the top floor of the rear facade of the historic building and preserve a sense of historic form and massing. That the scale and proportions of the window openings to the rear facades is consistent with other buildings of the block, and that the excavation work will be undertaken under the supervision of a professional engineer to ensure the safety of the historic buildings, facades, and neighboring buildings. And the architect will work with the staff to modify the front facade appearance of the metal railing over the mansard, either by raising the mansard to eliminate visibility of the railing on the front facade, or by setting back that railing sufficiently so that it does not appear from the front facade.
Thank you so much. And Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thanks. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Right, that's approved, and please continue to work with the staff on the detail at the top of the mansard, either the railing or the extending the mansard. And we'll move to the next item now.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is public meeting item number 3, LPC 23-08785, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 564, lot 17, 827, 831 Broadway, 827, 831 Broadway buildings, individual landmark. It's a pair of Italianate style commercial palaces with neo-Greek style elements designed by Griffith Thomas and built in 1866 to 67. The application is to amend an approval under LPC 21-03122 to construct rooftop additions and install storefronts and signage. The applicants will present the proposal after we open the proceedings.
All right, and we'll go ahead and do that now. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So move.
Thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and Commissioner Goldblum, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've never heard the term commercial palace. Is that a thing?
That is a thing. It's a building type that we have seen, in some districts like Ladies Mile Historic District, where you have former department stores and other large grand commercial buildings.
Wow. Okay. Live and learn.
Also
Thank
a
you.
marble palace, right? I believe this was referred to as a marble palace in the designation report.
Yep, that's right.
Wow. Live and
Okay,
learn.
commissioners,
Thank you.
you have the control of the presentation. Jordan, you can advance the slides using your arrow keys and your mouse. The project team may begin, but please state your name for the record before you do so.
You got it. Hello, good morning, commissioners. I'm Jordan Rogoff, partner at DXA Studio, and I'm back to share 2 proposed minor revisions to the approved design. Both really have to do with site conditions discovered in the erection of our mock-up, starting with the portion of the mock-up on the landmark site, which is a 3-story addition to 831 Broadway. When that was built, it conditionally approved, being that no visibility of the addition from directly across the street be had. And when the mock-up went up, we were able to see a sliver of the top. So what we're doing today is actually reducing the footprint, pushing that facade back another 31 inches to conform to the approval from 2021. The second revision is also a reduction in footprint, but this time of the portion of the development that's off of the landmark site, which is the 10-story tower located on East 12th Street. If you remember, the tower actually jutted out about a 5-foot projection over the landmark site, which necessitated a mock-up of that corner portion. And we're here after 2 years of trying to engineer a feat of structural engineering to build that 136-foot tall tower after deeming it infeasible, which we'll explain a little bit more. So it's those two changes, both reductions in overall footprint of the already approved design. So I wanted to start. I know that we have three new commissioners here since the last couple times that we presented. I just wanted to give a very brief background on the project. Here is the Commercial Palace or Marble Palace at 831 Broadway. The designation takes in part both the architectural significance, but even potentially more importantly, the cultural significance that this building in the 1950s and 60s became kind of a microcosm or hub of the abstract expressionist movement. So there were a number of the ABEX protagonists that lived here, including Willem and Elaine de Kooning, Paul Jenkins, Jules Olitsky, Herbert Ferber, and Larry Poons, who I actually believe still resides in the building. Through the years, these buildings, I guess, were kind of vacant as kind of commerce moved to the Upper West Side and Upper East Side. And so these vacant buildings became kind of magnets to all the ABEX artists. And they lived here. This was kind of the hub of their campus, the campus being between Washington Square and Union Square. And so we saw an opportunity here in restoring this building to also connect to this unbelievable history. I, for one, worked just a couple blocks from here for like 8 years, walked by, never knew anything that happened in this building. And so we saw an opportunity to, in the addition that we did, celebrate these artists. And so we met with a number of museum curators and authors and specialists with the ABEX movement, and really got to know the artists, and in particular, the artists that were in our buildings, or in our building, and we studied the kind of commonalities. While they look kind of wildly different from one another, there were kind of similar tenets to their approach that were very noteworthy. And why the abstract expressionist movement was so important is because it was the first time that New York City became kind of the center of the art world. Until then, nobody thought very much of American art. It was kind of more kind of pastoral and landscape paintings and that sort of thing. And so here, in large part because of World War II migration to New York City, we became the center of the art world, and we really feel like this is something that we have an opportunity to celebrate. So when we looked at the artists, those kind of those links between them were really first and foremost, and most obviously, the abstraction, taking an everyday subject matter, blowing it up, looking at it a different way. Second, very dynamic and gestural artworks. Like these guys were painting emotions. And in de Kooning's case, it was said that his pieces were never done until somebody actually removed them from the studio. They were always being tinkered with, always being worked upon. And so you had this kind of dynamism to a lot of their work. And then finally, like an innovation and ingenuity, like taking something like paint that had been used for hundreds of years before and using them in an entirely different way. Those aspects really started to kind of inform how we were going to think about the architecture and a design response to their contributions. And so we looked at a material as ubiquitous as glass, where you see it all over New York City, but we wanted to do it in a new way. And we looked at slumped glazing, and we looked at reflection trying to capture, distort, and reflect all of the energy around the Union Square area, like taking advantage of that and kind of redirecting it. So the facade design really had to do with pushing the limits to what is capable with glass, a deeper slump, a larger piece of glass, all things on the edge of what's possible. And we found 3 manufacturers globally that were able to do these 9-foot by 12-foot slump glass forms. In previous hearings, we had a great conversation with the commissioners about the relationship between our addition and the building beneath it, and there needing to be a very strong relationship between them compared to our first presentations. And so where we landed was to use the hierarchy, the rhythm, the balance of the Griffith Thomas building down below as a template or grid in which the slumped glass could be formed, so that there's a clear correlation between the two and a sympathy between them. Finally, the facade system is done as a two-skin system, which lowers the carbon footprint of the building and improves and really enhances the energy performance of the building. So tapping into the spirit of ingenuity that was a part of their work. And the areas, the kind of interstitial space between the existing building and the addition, those were opportunities for us to landscape and have a dynamic landscape, one that's changing through the seasons, changing in color, changing in character, and reflecting also in the glass. And it's also linked to de Kooning, who had kind of a seminal moment in his career where he moved from urban painting to natural kind of landscape painting and moved outside of the city. So it was kind of this transformation that happened in the building that we wanted to acknowledge. So with that, oh, sorry, this slide I just wanted to show as a reflection of how different the building will appear over the course of the day. The color and character, the reflection and transparency will always be kind of evolving over the course of the day and being quite dynamic. On the Griffith Thomas portion of the building, while this is at staff level, we just wanted to share very briefly that we're restoring it to two periods of significance, one being the 1866 period of the original construction, which can be seen on the eastern portion. On the western portion, that captures what the building looked like when the artists move in the 50s. And there's an eclecticism developing with these antique dealers on the bottom couple of floors, bringing windows and Juliet balconies and things back from Paris and installing. So that's the intent. As far as what we're doing here today is first, again, if you could see on the left, this is what was approved previously in 2021. And you can see that the setback of the three-story addition off of Broadway was set at 38 feet 6 inches off of Broadway. And then you see on the right, what we're amending or changing is that we're pushing that back to 41'1". And that is to eliminate visibility to conform to the original approval. The second portion, I want to make sure you can see my cursor. Are you able to see the cursor? Great. You'll see this portion, this 5-foot projection that happens over the landmark site. Given our inability to erect a mock-up, we're simply changing the floor plate, reducing it to eliminate that, have the entirety of the tower off the landmark site. And you'll be able to see on the next slide a little more readily. What we've done is we've flipped the building core to make this possible. We've eliminated one stop on the elevator to eliminate an elevator overrun and fit within the framework of, again, what was previously approved, with the exception of removing that corner piece. This axon can give you a sense if you go from the corner of this 10-story piece all the way down to the back of the courtyard, that 136-foot mock-up requirement. When we engineered it, and again, it took us about 10 engineers to find one brave enough to take something like this on. It was going to require multiple anchor points into the neighboring building. And while we reached out, we weren't able to advance that proposal, somewhat understandably. So there's no real feasible way to do the mock-up. What's to follow here are a number of renderings of what was presented at the approval compared to what we're revising. And if you can see, I'll flip back 1 or 2 times here between the two. You can see that the 3-story addition on 831 Broadway kind of receding a little bit. And you can see the chamfered corner disappearing above the parapet of our neighbor to the north. These are a series of visibility studies since corroborated by the mock-up from the north of Union Square looking south. And then a more detailed or enlarged version of those renderings between first approved previously, revised with our proposal today. And then another of a revised proposal a little bit closer to the building on Broadway, north of East 13th. So this is at the heart of why we're here today. There were 3 areas of kind of ramped up sidewalks that roughly align with entry points into these buildings. Those elevations weren't on the initial survey that we had. So when we built the mock-up did its job. It showed where there was a deviation from what was represented. And again, our response to that is simply pushing back 31 inches, which we've done with the mock-up, as can be seen on this slide. So it's no longer visible, again, conforming to the approval from 2021. And then moving south on Broadway, for the most part, the adjacent buildings are larger and block any view of the mock-ups. So then we moved to the side streets. And the side streets, when we presented before, there was an understanding that there would be limited visibility for kind of short durations or a minimal amount of linear footage along these streets. And so you could see, starting with East 13th, A, B, and C, we're gradually going back in increments of, say, 25 to 30 feet or so between those. And this is just to show the representation that was given previously aligns with the mock-up. So the mock-up has been shown to be accurate from these vantage points. And then this is an enlargement of one of those views. Again, you can see the chamfered corner. And then visibility further back on East 13th. So this is stepping back a little bit further than we showed previously. Again, when we get to that point, about 138 feet off of Broadway, you're no longer able to see the addition there. So this in working with staff over the past few months was to look at East 12th Street because there is a limited kind of tranche of visibility. For the most part, that visibility happens over the adjacent building. But there is, I think, about a 20 or 25 foot area where you're able to see a little bit of the addition over top of the 831. And then finally, some images of the mock-up as it stands. I'm not sure if you were able to get over and see the mock-up in place. It remains there, and you're welcome to come by and see that at any point. This is a survey executed after the mock-up was revised to get pushed westward 31 inches, again, to conform to no visibility from across the street on Broadway. And then these are often helpful, the sight lines from directly across the street, and that is at 6 feet, right up against the street wall of the neighboring buildings, or I'm sorry, the buildings located across the street. So again, on the bottom right-hand corner, you see those 3 blue tinted areas. Those were the sidewalk elevations that were above the interpolated series of elevations used in the initial studies. And this is at the central one, which exists between the 2 pediments. And then finally, in the areas where the elevations did conform with that initial survey, you'll see there's quite a bit of breathing room from the setback with this addition of 31 inches of space. And so I just want to say in closing that we're aware of letters that the commissioners have received, and just wanted to say that I think with the erection of the mock-up, I think pretty much all of the representations that we've provided throughout this have been corroborated. The issues have been addressed, and this presentation really represents the best of our abilities, and we believe is a very fair representation. And then also noteworthy is that the visibility will be monitored throughout the construction process. So this is a process, and the mock-up did what it was supposed to do, and we've since addressed that. And I believe that there was also a a letter about a potential easement, which I want to kind of turn over to my colleague Valerie Campbell with Kramer Levin to address.
Unmute myself. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Valerie Campbell. I'm a partner with Kramer Levin, and we're land use counsel to the applicant. It is somewhat surprising to me that although this project has been in the review process for over 3 years, we received last week letters suggesting that there might be a fire egress easement that would benefit neighboring buildings, and that because of this easement that the commission should refrain from taking any action on this application. I would note that our title company has found no evidence of any egress easements. They have not shown up on our title report, and we have asked them to look at that. Nonetheless, we're happy to look at anything that the neighbors can produce and to discuss it with them. However, I think it's important to note that there is no reason why this issue should delay the commission's consideration of the application. To the extent that there is any egress route that might be the subject of an easement, it is entirely off the landmark site in the portion of the tower portion of the building that fronts on East 12th Street. And in the event that there is any requirement imposed either by the buildings department or by law to provide some sort of egress to the adjacent buildings, it could be accomplished entirely off the landmark site through the 12th Street building and would not have any impact on the addition that you are reviewing on top of the landmark building. So as we said, we're happy to investigate this issue further and talk to the neighbors about it, but we don't see any reason why it should delay the commission's consideration of this modification to the design. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so, yeah,
Can I just say,
Mark.
Commissioner, I just want to just follow up just briefly on that point, just to note that as I think all of the commissioners know, but just to remind them, when we approve something at a public, when you vote to approve something at a public hearing, it is contingent upon the review and approval of the final DOB construction drawings. It's only when we review those and confirm that they are consistent with your approval that we issue the actual C of A. To the extent that upon submission of DOB, drawings to DOB, this easement issue comes up and necessitates changes to the design, as Valerie said. Two things will happen. Either it'll happen in a way that has no effect on any exterior portion of the building, or to the extent it does, the commission staff will review that and make a decision whether any amendment needs to happen, or if it's particularly material to what you have approved, it would come back even to you if it had to result in some material and substantial change to the approved design. So that is the process that sort of would, account for this issue.
Thank you, Mark. All right, and we have at least one question. Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead. Commissioner Jefferson, just accept the request to unmute.
Okay. My question has to do with visual perception. In this chamfered corner, is it more visible than the right angle corner in your architectural judgment, or less?
I think it's less, because when we've done these visibility studies, what kind of kept poking up above the adjacent buildings was the projected corner. And so I think there's more vantage points where we benefit than vantage points from where any negative aspect of the chamfer. If you're asking me as an architect and designer, do I prefer this over the previous edge? I do not. I'm a purist, and it's a tough place to go, but it's a very necessary one to facilitate the project. And again, it's only really visible from a very kind of short period of visibility on East 13th Street in particular.
Thank you very much for your, thank you.
Thank you.
Candid remarks. Thanks.
Yes.
All right, Commissioner Chu.
Yes, I just have a couple detail questions. Clearly from all your perspective views that it is not the addition is not that visible. You've shown us where it's most visible. I'm looking at the slide on the screen right now. So I do think that the slump glass expression is interesting. I can imagine it having a beautiful play of light. I can read, at least in your rendering, a relationship to the windows in Griffith Thomas's building below. My question is related to the cornice. I'm just trying to understand what the detail is at the top there, because I see a band.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a quite lengthy presentation set, which we really culled down to not go too long today. And so I'm happy to forward over that.
Yeah.
But in essence, one of the exercises is it's quite expensive to do this form work, right? We brought it down to really just 3 repeated elements, where the 9x12 slumped portion that kind of represents that singular bay is one. Then we kind of, if you could see, we kind of repeated the coinage that happens on the Thomas building down below on the edges. And then the third element is the cornice itself. And so the cornice is actually kind of part spandrel and part parapet. So there's it projects out a little bit. It has a little bit of distortion to it, but it's probably the flattest element of the 3 kind of kit of 3 parts of forms that constitute the elevation.
Okay. I mean, the reason I raised the comment is because there is a simplicity to your glass facade that I definitely appreciate. And because what you really look at, if you were to see, it's interesting because the glass facade is something you want to look at, but at the same time, because of setbacks and the requirements of visibility, you basically don't see it much. But when you do get a glimpse, I would like to see that glass volume in its splendor, right? So that's why I'm asking about the top detail. I think it's something that can be worked out with staff. I just wondered whether you could have brought it up, the glass up all the way, or recess the metal panel piece so that it didn't make it.
Sorry, there is no metal. That's all glass.
Oh, it's all glass.
Yes. Yeah.
Ooh.
Sorry. The glass is in some areas, the glass can be treated from the back so that it's a kind of a spandrel quality to it. So you don't see the flange and fireproofing.
Got it.
And then it turns into the rail. So it's a pretty sophisticated little piece of glass.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. The last question I have is, because it is such a visual object here, and the play of light and glass will be somewhat visible in the evening. What is the design intent for lighting? Is it just internally lit based on the occupants, or is there actual architectural lighting on this glass facade?
That's a great question. And if I go back, let me just go back to right here. So yes, there's an interstitial space which is part of the 2-skin system,
right?
And so that is used to heat and cool and creates kind of an air barrier. And so if the question is, have we thought to kind of choreograph or light that space, that is our preference, but it will really be the leaseholders' willingness to work with that on us. So I can't commit to one way or the other, but our preference as designers would be to collaboratively create an ability to really play off of the transparency and night presence.
Right, and because it's sealed, this glass wall, it's not a rain screen. So you
Right.
have a cavity behind. What is the thickness of these modules? Because and I'm sure you have studied this. I'm
Yeah.
just curious. If I look at this at angle, I'm looking at the return depth of the glass and the grout that's between the glass panels. How deep is that dimension of this module?
Do you know? Do you remember the
Panels are 12 by 6 for the panels, and the depth.
In
the
depth?
We got to 18 inches.
There's a bit more.
They're significant.
24 inch. Yeah, I mean, again,
Wow.
the Thomas elevation down below, one of its greatest strengths is that depth with the kind of marble columns. So we wanted to emulate that, and then we gave, I think, another like 2.5 to 3 feet, so you could actually get in there. You'll need to clean the space, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and because they're so large, there's a scale to each of these panels that's literally like a window bay from below. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? All right, not seeing any questions. I'll just note for the record that we did receive 8 letters recommending denial of the application and 3 letters recommending or in support of the application. Those letters were shared with the commissioners in advance of today's hearing and have also been addressed by the applicants today in their presentation. So we'll begin our discussion. I'm going to ask you all to unmute. And as you know, some of you are learning today, this project was approved by the commission, and shortly after the 2 buildings were designated, and the buildings were designated for their historical and cultural significance, as well as their architectural significance, but certainly the cultural and historical significance was a big part of the designation. And so when the commission reviewed this proposal for this expansion and addition, the commission found that a visible addition of this type and style to be appropriate to the cultural and historical significance of the building, and also appropriate to the architectural significance, in that there was a dialogue between the design of the top addition and the facade of the buildings. And this was approved. It was approved contingent upon the applicants constructing a mock-up to confirm the visibility that was presented in the renderings. And as the applicants presented, the mock-up of the rooftop addition on the designated portion of the lot showed that there was a view over the primary facade that was not expected. And so they have set the rooftop addition back an additional 2 feet to eliminate that view, so that the view of the rooftop addition is accurate in terms of its how it was represented in the renderings. Further, there was the difficulty of constructing, or infeasibility of constructing, a mock-up for the taller portion of the building resulted in a modification they're showing today, which is to chamfer the corner to push it off of the landmark site. And so that portion of the building is off the landmark site, but was, part of the discussion as it did overlap the lot at one point, and is certainly seen in the context of this overall expansion. So we'll focus our comments today on these 2 changes: one, to set back the rooftop addition further so that it aligns with the renderings that were represented, and to chamfer the corner of the taller element so that it's off the landmark site. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I obviously was present during earlier discussions of the project, and I think that both of these changes are highly desirable, and that it has improved the situation from our earlier approval of the general project. So both the chamfering and the setback, I think, are positive changes, and I can approve it as presented.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Agreed 100%. This project was a controversial one when we saw it a number of years ago, but I think that the design I at the time wasn't supportive of it, and I still support it. I think that this is an appropriate building to have a visible rooftop addition. I agree with Jordan that the cutting of the chamfer is an unfortunate move that, in a way, attracts attention to what was supposed to be a kind of quiet background structure, but it's off the landmark site, so it's out of our remit to talk about it. But I think that the project, I was walking up Broadway yesterday and I was like, where the heck is that addition? We approved that a long time ago. So I hope it goes up, and it goes up soon, and it goes up successfully.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bland.
Yes, echoing what the two commissioners have just said, it was controversial. It was very exciting as well, I think, to get such an interesting proposal on top of this very extraordinary piece of architecture, but also of the history that went on within its walls over time, with the abstract expressionists inhabiting so much of it. So I think these changes don't affect it significantly in any way that should change the approval that we've already given the project. So I can support it.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yes, I can support the two changes.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
I agree. I think these two changes are appropriate, and I can approve it as submitted.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, likewise here. This is a hard labor. It's been languishing for many years. So I echo the sentiment of Commissioner Goldblum and Vice Chair Bland. Will be exciting to see this come forward.
Great,
I totally
thank you.
support it.
Thanks. All right, and Commissioner Chu, I know this was the first time seeing this for you, and I know unfortunately our findings are limited to these changes that they're presenting today, but feel free to add any comments you'd like on the changes, or if you want to opine on the design as well that's outside of today's decision.
No, I think I made several questions, which I think the applicant is answered clearly. I again did not see this previously, but I have seen the history and the amounts of revisions that the applicant has gone through over the years, and appreciate all that work, and especially that huge mock-up which was built. I think it's a very interesting project. I appreciate the simple approach, although it is hardly simple or inexpensive, this facade. And I do think that from the renderings, I'm seeing articulation because of the choice of some slump glass. I think that's a nice choice. I think having just a glass facade flat up there would not give any sense of scale or rhythm to the building below. So yeah, I think this is appropriate design, and am excited to see it realized.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, you also were here originally.
I wasn't here originally, and I realized there are only two issues we're reviewing today, the chamfer and the additional setback, and I think both of them are appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Master.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I also support this and find it appropriate.
Okay, so I think we have a consensus to approve. Commissioner Chapin, would you make the motion?
Sure, thank you. In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 2308785, 827-831 Broadway, buildings, individual landmark. Pair of Italianate style commercial palaces with neo-Greek style elements designed by Griffith Thomas and built in 1866-67. Application is to amend an approval under LPC 21-03122 to construct rooftop additions and install storefronts and signage. I recommend approval, finding that setting back the previously approved addition and additional 2 feet 7 inches will eliminate visibility over the primary facade when viewed from across the street as documented by a physical mock-up. The chamfering the corner of the addition at the non-designated building on 12th Street will make that addition completely off the landmark site, thereby rendering that addition further dissociated from the designated historic buildings on Broadway, and that the proposed changes are consistent with and supportive of the previous commission approval.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thanks. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you.
Thanks
And
so much.
again, thank you. As always, our approvals are contingent upon the staff's final receiving and final review and approval of the drawings that are being filed at the Department of Buildings. And should the egress issue come up, the staff will review that. And if there is any substantive or material change in the design, we'll bring that back to you.
Sounds
right.
good. Thanks so much.
Thank you. We'll move to the next item now.
The next item is public meeting item number 4, LPC 23-05155, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 489, Lot 22, 188 Spring Street in the Sullivan Thompson Historic District. This is an altered federal style row house built circa 1824. The application is to alter the front facade, construct rear yard and rooftop additions, and excavate the cellar. It was last presented at the public hearing of March 28th, 2023, and no action was taken at that time. The staff will present the revisions to the proposal.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Timothy Shaw, Preservation staff. 188 Spring Street is a row house built circa 1824 that was significantly modified with a new brick facade prior to 1964. And with modified openings at the ground floor, which is currently clad with wood. The proposal was previously presented at the public hearing of March 28th, 2023, and consisted of alterations at the front facade, the construction of a full-height, full-width rear yard addition, the construction of a large dormer at the rear of the sloped roof, and excavation beneath the addition and into the rear yard. I'm just getting to this. At the hearing, some commissioners were concerned with the new design of the ground floor, which is at the left, which was for a speculative interpretation of the original federal design, and suggested that the entry alterations and old horsewalk opening be referenced in a new design. In response, the proposal at the ground floor has been redesigned. The historic stone lintel, which was partially visible here, you can see in these probes beneath some of the cladding. This will be retained and restored as needed, so it will continue across the facade as was present in the tax photo. A new large window will be installed at the center of the facade to recall the old display window from the commercial alterations of the 20th century. And the masonry at the eastern opening will be slightly recessed to recall the horsewalk opening. That design is inspired in part by conditions that were found at 19 Van Dam Street. Sorry, went too far. Seen here, this was indicated on old tax maps that this had a horsewalk opening, and you can see the way it was filled in even at the tax photo and is currently filled in now. At the rear facade, the rear addition has been reduced in height by a floor. You can see here in the elevation, and this is a little more clear in this section. So the previous proposal at the left, current proposal at the right. The second floor addition is slightly larger than it was previously proposed, but still the top floor facade will remain. It will be rebuilt with new masonry at the same plane, and with 2 new doors leading to the roof of the new addition. And at the roof, the new dormer will be narrower than was previously proposed, and will now be set back just slightly from the plane of the rear facade. The proposed excavation is unchanged. Matthew Luciola and Peter Radocha from Crown Design are also on hand if you have any further questions, and I'll just jump to the renderings here.
All right, commissioners, do we have any questions for either Tim or the applicant? All right, I'm not seeing any questions, and I will note that we did get letters from the Historic Districts Council, the Village Preservation, and one individual, and those letters were shared with the commissioners in advance of today's public meeting. All right, so if there are no other questions, we'll move to our discussion, and I'll ask you all to unmute yourselves. And we'll begin. This application included changes to the ground floor of this facade that has already had a veneer added over it, a rear yard addition, and dormer additions. And when we last saw this on March 28th, and I'll just note that the building historically had a horse walk, which was closed in the 1960s, and it was incorporated into the interior of the building and did not function as a passageway, and it doesn't exist today as a passageway. But on March 28th, when we reviewed this, we did ask them to design an opening that would be a reminder that there was once a horse walk at this building. And so the applicants have proposed a design with a window and the change in masonry that is based on a historic example nearby. And at the back of the building, we asked the applicants to lower the rear yard addition by a floor, which they have done. And we've asked for the dormer to be pulled in on the side, lowered from the roof, and set back a little bit more to read more as a dormer and less as a top floor as it did in the previous proposal. So the applicant has made 3 changes in response to those 3 comments. And we'll have a discussion now whether those 3 responses have satisfied the comments. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Oh, sure. In terms of the front facade, I think what they have done is acceptable and works well for me. In terms of what they did with the horse doorway makes sense and kind of give them a marker that's what was there at a certain point in history. The back facade also works for me. My only issue with the back facade is that whether they have a step down, kind of a step down diagram. So go back to the section. It steps down, and I'm wondering, in that particular donut, is there any other building that have this particular stepping down? And if not, I would rather just see a simple standard.
Well, I think, yeah, we can go to the block plan or maybe the photographs, and yeah, this is maybe good. It's a varied block with a lot of big buildings around it, including the adjacent building, which was another approval that we did that will be a much bigger and deeper building. So it really doesn't have a typical sort of row house context. It's a varied block with larger, deeper buildings.
Therefore, I think it's fine. I think it worked. I can accept that. Okay. And finally, the excavation, I think under the supervision of a licensed engineer, they can do that. So I can approve this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree. I think they did a great job. They responded to our comments. the incorporation of the recess for the crosswalk is skillful and subtle. I think that the modification at the rear facade is very important in maintaining the profile of the sloped roof. I think it's a totally appropriate project, and I wish them the best.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Thank you.
I think that this is appropriate. I have no issues, and I think that the revisions are improvements.
Okay, great. Thank you. Vice Chair Bland.
I would agree. I think this is now appropriate.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
I agree. I'm not sure that I was here for the previous hearing, but I think all the changes they've made are appropriate, and I can find it acceptable.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yes, I agree. I'm particularly happy about the roof line and the reduction and the treatment of the horse passage, which I think is all of which are very satisfactory.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg.
I was not here for the last hearing, but this seems totally appropriate.
And Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, appropriate.
Right, and Commissioner Master.
I agree, appropriate.
Okay, all right, so I think we all are in agreement. I think the applicants very carefully responded to the 3 areas of comments that we had, and we have come back with something I think we can approve today. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you be comfortable making the motion?
I would love to, Chair Carroll, but I can't find it on my computer.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Commissioner Master, would you be able to read the motion?
Sure.
Thanks.
In the matter of LPC 2305155, 188 Spring Street, Sullivan Thompson Historic District, an altered federal style row house built circa 1824. Application is to alter the front facade, construct rear yard and rooftop additions, and excavate the cellar. I note that the building scale, style, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Sullivan Thompson Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the front facade was altered with a new brick veneer, new openings and wood cladding at the ground floor, and applied wood lintels at the upper floors prior to 1964, that the existing rear dormer is not historic, and the rear facade has been significantly modified. Therefore, the proposed alterations will not eliminate any significant architectural features. That the proposed design of the ground floor with a new brick facade beneath a stone lintel, a cast stone water table, and low stoop with a paneled wood door with transom and a new opening will return the facade closer to its historic appearance. That the installation of a new fixed multi-light wood window within a large central opening at the ground floor will be in keeping with the commercial alterations at row houses that characterize this historic district. That the recessed brick with a double hung window at the former horse walk will maintain a reference to this historic feature and will be in keeping with previously infilled former horse walks at buildings of a similar age and style found elsewhere within this and neighboring historic districts. That the new cast stone lintels and sills at the new window openings and at the existing non-historic openings at the 2nd and 3rd floors will be in keeping with the age and style of the building. That the rear facade has been significantly altered over time and its demolition will not result in the loss of any significant architectural features. That the building is located at the end of the block adjacent to a much larger building, and that the proposed 2-story rear yard addition will not overwhelm the original volume of the building or diminish the block's central green space. That the design of the addition, featuring a continuous vertical plane of large window and door assemblies with spandrel panels, will maintain the scale of the building as a federal house that has been enlarged over time. That the top floor of the rear facade will be rebuilt in the same plane as the existing facade, Therefore, the historic volume will be retained, and that the new doors at the top floor will relate well to the building's overall fenestration. That the new dormer addition at the rear sloped roof will be only modestly larger than the existing dormer and is well scaled to the historic pitched roof. That the combination of the two additions will not obscure the historic relationship between the rear facade and pitched roof above. That the additions will not be visible from any public thoroughfares following construction of the new building at the corner of Spring and Thompson Streets. That the proposed excavation work will provide for additional clearance at the new cellar and will occur primarily within the footprint of the new rear yard addition, with a small portion within the rear yard beyond the addition, and that a significant portion of the rear yard will remain unexcavated, thereby retaining green space at the block interior. And that the excavation and any necessary underpinning will be done in compliance with the DOB regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer to protect the building's facades and the adjacent buildings. Wow, that was a lot.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next public meeting item.
Thank you. Next item is public meeting item number 5, LPC 23-08711. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1374, lot 69, 785 Fifth Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is an apartment building designed by Emery Roth and Sons and built in 1962 to 63. The application is to enlarge storefront openings and install infill and canopies. This was last presented at the public hearing of April 25th, 2023, and no action was taken at that time. The applicants will present their revisions to the proposal after we open the proceedings.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that now so that they can speak. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the proceedings are open and the applicants may present.
Hey, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing, and George, you now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen. George? Are you there? I need you to click on your screen and then you'll be able to advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Great.
There we
Perfect.
go. Sorry. My
Please state your name
apologies.
for the record and you may begin.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is George Schieferdecker. I'm with BKSK Architects, and I have Harry Kendall with me on the call, on the Zoom. We appreciated the commissioners' comments on our original. On our original proposal, and we have made modifications to the design in consultation with the co-op board that we believe address your concerns and strengthen the initial design's overall appropriateness. Thank you. There we go. Here I am. Harry just told me my camera was not, so here I am. Sorry about that. We are at the corner of Fifth Avenue and 60th Street. It's 785 Fifth Avenue. No, I don't seem to be advancing. My apologies.
George, maybe try your keyboard, maybe try the
I
arrow.
did try my key here, and I am hitting the forward arrow.
Okay. Try your mouse. Maybe the mouse would work.
There we go. Thank you. I don't know why that didn't work. A reminder, please, that this is a no style building in the designation report. Nevertheless, I think we all agree that there is a typology on the Upper East Side of what we might call white brick apartment buildings that we look to respect and build upon and enhance. And finally, a reminder that the initial architecture of the ground floor was done in part as a response to a particular tenant, a bank tenant that was looking for privacy, and that current tenants, current retail tenants, current commercial tenants, including banks, are looking for a much greater degree of transparency and openness to the street. Our previous proposal is shown here, and the concerns expressed by the commissioners were, there were really 4 issues. Number 1 was that the bay between the retail bay, between the entrance and the balance of the retail bays was not properly aligned with the fenestration above the stone jointing and felt awkward. There was also concern expressed for the size of this retail signage and a concern expressed for the extent of the retail signage. And finally, there was a concern expressed for having a third canopy on the Fifth Avenue side when there might be 3 retail tenants. Our current proposal then includes the following modifications. At the bay between the other retail storefronts and the residential storefront, we have extended it to be the full width of the fenestration above, replicated the border all the way across, and then produced a limestone separation between residential and storefront in a slightly altered fashion. We have reduced the size of the signage and the lettering. We have eliminated some of the bays in which the signing was previously, and we are proposing that we will not have a third canopy on the Fifth Avenue side if there is to be a retail tenant on Fifth Avenue, a third retail tenant on Fifth Avenue. So looking now in depth at the changes at the bay between the residential entrance and the storefronts, you can see that what we've done previously, there was a consideration or a concern for the fact that the going halfway neither respected the stone jointing nor the fenestration above, and produced a somewhat awkward storefront that was not in concert either with the existing building or our own architectural renovation on the other storefronts. So we have gone full width to respect the fenestration and the bay rhythm of our own changes. And then within that surround, that limestone that goes full width, we are once again respecting the fenestration that is above, which does not match the stone jointing, and the fenestration as we have created it on the balance of the facade on the retail side. Simultaneously, we've left in place some of that separation between the residential entrance and the storefronts with an insertion of a piece of limestone that matches the depth of the signage band above. Here are some quick studies that indicate the various options that we considered. Our previous proposal is here. Our current proposal is here. The previous signage was 18 inches tall and extended 2 inches out. These are diagrammatic in nature. The signage is proposed as lettering that states proud of a limestone spandrel and pinned to the back of the stone individually. We have changed that signage to a height of not 16 inches, but 13 inches. I think you can sense that the difference in the signage from one to the other is substantial. When there is a single tenant, we are proposing that we would take the 2 end bays and eliminate signage from those so that the signage would be concentrated around the entrance to for that single tenant and around the corner onto 60th Street. When there are two tenants, we would like to once again no longer have signage in the between the residential entrance and the commercial entrance on Fifth Avenue, but because we have an additional tenant on 60th Street, we need that signage at the end, and we are proposing a blank bay between the two tenancies. If there are three tenants, we are proposing that we would need continuous signage on Fifth Avenue, and we would leave the 60th Street side in the way we said previously, with a blank band in between the two retail tenants. A reminder that in the district, there are examples of architectural expressions at the base of buildings that have continuous signage in between the sort of continuation of that expression down to the street, both in our neighbor, the Sherry Netherlands, and on the northeast corner of 64th and Madison. Visibility, in our case, equates viability. This commercial location is at the end of the Fifth Avenue retail corridor and at the end of the retail presence coming from Madison and moving west. And the last issue that you asked us to address was the number of canopies on Fifth Avenue. And one tenant, a single canopy on Fifth Avenue, two tenants, a single canopy on Fifth Avenue, and a canopy, fixed canopy on 60th Street. With three tenants, we are proposing that their third tenant live without a canopy at its entrance. It's also possible, obviously, that there might be two tenants on Fifth Avenue and none on 60th Street. We would advocate the same approach on Fifth Avenue for two or three tenants in that instance. That's our proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Right. Yes, Commissioner Chu, please go ahead.
Yeah, question is just in that bay that's next to the hotel or the residence entry with the canopy there. The horizontal versus the vertical, is there an expressed joint, or is that right now I'm reading it as planar singular, but there's obviously going to be a horizontal line there, right?
Correct.
Okay, because when you show the version with the signage above, it seems like it then becomes a totally separate plane, vertical versus the horizontal.
There would be a joint where you mentioned, yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Certainly.
All right. Other questions before we move to our discussion? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
It's very interesting, just pure design issue. The new window, you know, you put an L solid, you have a rectangle and then you put an L in it, and then you have the window. And the symmetry of the windows up above and all the other windows, you got rid of the symmetry. Why? Why not just keep the symmetry and have a U panel and put the glass in the middle? What was why the L shape? Am I making any sense?
Well, we're interested in preserving the limestone, a little bit of the limestone separation between the residential entry and the storefronts. And then we're interested in matching up with the fenestration above, much in the way we did in the storefronts to the left of that. So we carry that line all the way up and down of the fenestration above into this bay, and we express it differently here, only that the last bay becomes another piece of limestone, so that we sort of play a little bit of both and.
It becomes an L shape, that last piece.
Correct, yeah. But as Commissioner Chu mentioned, there is a joint line there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right. Any other final questions? Right, and the applicant has, provided studies which were presented on an earlier slide for this, how to treat this last window here. So if anyone wants to ask about those studies and how they came to this as their final solution, this would be the time to ask that question. Okay. All right, so I think then I'll ask you all to unmute so that we can begin our discussion. All right, thank you. And so the last time we had this discussion, saw this presentation to enlarge the openings and install signage and canopies. The end bay was sort of a half width opening. And I think that many of the commissioners had questions about whether it should align with the joint in the stone above or align with the windows above. And I think there were lots of different thoughts, and I think commissioners did want to see studies to understand what the right size would be to have the best relationship. At that time, we also asked that the applicants reduce the size and number of the signage, the signs, which the applicants have done. They've reduced the size, and they've also limited the number per depending on tenant, and structured the master plan in that way to ensure that no more signs per tenant are not available. And similarly, a couple of commissioners had concerns about the potential for 3 canopies on Fifth Avenue, 2 potential retail canopies and a residential canopy. And so the applicants have come back today with the master plan being structured so that there would never be more than 2 canopies, 1 commercial one and 1 residential canopy on Fifth Avenue. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Holford Smith, I think the last time we saw this, you sort of did question the proportion of that end opening, but ultimately decided that it was challenging to figure out the right proportion and that you were comfortable with it as it was proposed. So this is something different now. We'll see how this addresses that. But you were also one of the commissioners that had concerns about the potential for 3 canopies, which I think the applicants have addressed today by only allowing a maximum of 2. So what are your thoughts today?
I think all the changes are really positive. I'll start with the easy ones. I think the reduction in the size of the signage is much more appropriate. I also appreciate their master plan not allowing for the 3rd canopy on Fifth Avenue, which I think would have been just too much, too many canopies on this building. And I think that their proposal for where to eliminate signage based on tenancy looks appropriate to me. The last bay next to the residential entry, I think this is an interesting solution. I think that making the limestone frame the full width of the window opening above is the right thing to do. And I think having the limestone nearest the door, I understand they want to have some separation between the residential and the retail. My only comment is that I think that horizontal that carries across the other bays that obviously has glass below, that should carry across rather than just a joint. I think and then if they did have to have signage, then it would be more logical. But I think if they could bring the mullion across, or maybe the limestone is set in the mullion rather than have it be this L shape, would I think address some of the concerns that some people had about the asymmetry, that the symmetrical but then not symmetrical completely. So
something that expresses that line more than just a joint.
Yeah, then I think otherwise it's great.
Okay, great. Thanks. Vice Chair Bland.
I agree that my one issue of unease, I would say, was that last bay, and I think the resolution of it is very interesting. Not one I would have maybe thought about myself, but I think it works. The rest of the issues are fine. The reduction of size of the lettering is good. The reduction of a possible 3rd marquee is good. So it's all good now.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Ginsburg.
I agree, it's good, and I think the one comment that can be resolved in staff level is that 1 bay of breaking up the L so that the line across comes across.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Master?
I agree with Commissioner Holford Smith's comments. I think it's appropriate.
Okay. And Commissioner Jefferson?
The architects have taken a project that was kind of dull and made it extremely elegant. And I think they did an incredible job. I think the signage is the right proportion. I worry about the L shape, but I can accept it. It's well done.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yes, I think that the reduction of the lettering size for signage is a great improvement. I also think it is more realistic because if the tenant's name is longer, the big letters become very challenging as well, as any graphic designer would say. So I think smaller is definitely more elegant. And I do appreciate the respect of the bay as it continues vertically up and down. I made a comment about the joint. I do think a horizontal line is needed. And I think they can work, the applicant can work with staff on options there, as well as the comment that Anne mentioned about plane. Is there a hierarchy? Is the horizontal more proud than the vertical, which might want to be more in the glass plane? I think that's a possible option. Otherwise, I think that it's a great project, and it's definitely improved this landmark building.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree with all the other commissioners, and I actually have liked the solution to the last opening, and you know, it could have an additional mullion or something to horizontal to reinforce it. But you know, even as it is, I think it's just it's a better solution, and one that we didn't really expect. So, I think everything is very good about the project.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum?
I do think that it's appropriate as it is. I can't help but feel some kind of sympathy for Emery Roth, designer of the El Dorado, so many other amazing buildings. And the only little ounce of design that he put into this was that solid panel to the left of the main door, and it's going. And so I don't think that that's really a good thing. I feel like, you know, here, this poor architect who is such a glory in doing what he did, had his hands and feet tied behind his back by modernism, and this is all he could come up with, and here we are messing with it. But I mean, it's really not a very contributing building, and I actually like the L of the limestone as is. I think it kind of brings that band around and down in an interesting architectural way. That's not really a historic preservation comment, but just the design one. And I can find it appropriate, but I do have to register that sad note.
Okay, thanks. And Commissioner Chen, you weren't here last time, but you've heard the discussion. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, with deep condolences to Emery Roth with his last repainting panel, but I agree with all the comments. I think that especially Commissioner Chu and Vice Chair Blands about the signage, the reduction in signage, and also on the practical level, the horizontality of it that makes it the appropriate way. As to Anne's suggestion, I tend to leave it up to the commissioners to see whether you want to deepen the horizontal band, but I can accept it as is.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I think that we do have a number of commissioners who would like to see that horizontal piece expressed a little bit more. So maybe I think we can, Commissioner Holford Smith, if you're comfortable with this, make a motion to approve the project with the condition that they continue to work in consultation with the staff to refine that horizontal expression.
Yes, sounds good.
Thanks.
In the matter of LPC 2308711, 785 Fifth Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District, an apartment building designed by Emery Roth and Sons and built 1962-63. The application is to enlarge storefront openings and install infill and canopies. I note that the building is not one for which the Upper East Side Historic District was designated. I recommend approval with slight modification finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the enlarged masonry openings at the building's base will remove only a limited amount of plain masonry and will reflect the historic pattern of punched openings above, that the proposed storefront and entrance infill will be in keeping with infill found at buildings of this age in terms of configuration, details, and finishes, and the tripartite configuration will be reflective of the fenestration above. That the proposed pin-mounted signage will be well-scaled and typical of signage found at buildings of this type and age in terms of placement, material, and quantity. That the installation of small metal marquees at storefront entrances and a larger canopy over the residential entrance with a sculptural address indicator in the transom will mark the entrances without concealing or detracting from the building or the streetscape, and their simple modern design with integral lighting will relate well to the building. And that the proposed proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. And I find, however, that the applicant should work with staff to develop a more horizontal expression of the limestone panel in the last bay.
Thank you very much. All right, and Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Please continue to work with the staff on that final detail. And we'll move to the next and final public meeting item for our public meeting agenda today.
Okay, and that is public meeting item number 6, LPC 22-11297, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1492, lot 60, 22 East 81st Street in the Metropolitan Museum Historic District. This is a row house originally designed by Tom and Wilson and built in 1883 to 84 and remodeled circa 1977 with a new stucco facade. The application is to reclad the facade, replace windows, and modify openings. This was last presented at the public meeting of January 31st, 2023, and no action was taken at that time. The applicants will present revisions to the proposal after we open the proceedings.
All right, so we'll go ahead and do that now. Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the applicants may present now.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and I believe the staff is going to do a brief intro.
Yes, good afternoon, commissioners. Timothy Shaw, preservation staff. 22 East 81st Street is a late 19th century row house that was remodeled circa 1977, right at the time of designation, with the current modern facade. The proposal was previously presented at the public meeting of November 1st, 2022, after being read into the record at the public hearing of October 25th, 2022, and a revised proposal was presented at the public meeting of January 31st, 2023. The proposal was for the removal of existing cladding and windows and for the installation of a new limestone facade with new single pane wood windows. And you can see the original demo at the left, the original public hearing proposal on the center left, and the second public meeting proposal on the center right. The commissioners were not supportive of the original proposal presented at the first public meeting or the revised proposal presented at the subsequent public meeting, both of which featured a stylized or simplified ornament, and asked the applicant to continue to revise the design to better recall historic precedents in the district or to introduce a compatible contemporary design. In response, the proposal has been redesigned as seen at the right, and the architect Drew Lang will now present this revised proposal in further detail.
Great, Drew, you now have control of the presentation. If you could just click on your screen. Then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Drew Lang of Lang Architecture, presenting 22 East 81st Street. So if it's okay, I'll begin with this slide and then move backwards to the beginning of the presentation and take you through. The narrative here moves from the left where we were originally and still are today with the existing modified original facade. Our first gestures were to move towards a classical expression while maintaining a purity and simplicity. We've now moved to what's clearly more historic in nature and takes very clear cues from the block, which we'll look at shortly. Also, taking the feedback from the commissioners in previous meetings, we've more clearly expressed and differentiated the base course from the parlor level and then the shaft of the building. And so if I may, I'm going to scroll back to the very beginning to take you through the entire narrative. This simply locates us, 22 East 81st Street. On the left, of course, is the 1940 tax lot photo showing the original facade. On the right, the 1980 tax lot photo reflecting the state of the facade today, which is shown here. This shows the existing facade in its street context. Then moving to where we are right now with our current proposal, and then zooming in a bit more closely for you to see, a few things. One, just to talk about why we've selected Indiana limestone versus a brownstone. There's clearly more prevalence of the limestone in this block, and we feel like the limestone is really the best way of situating the building within the framework of its context. The other thing is that all of the homes, all of the buildings along the street now have street level entrances versus entrances with a large pronounced stoop, and we felt like the stoop was going to interrupt the flow of the of people moving across the block, much less the sort of visual character of the block. You can also see there's now a clear expression of the window head and capital, all up and down the building, with the most pronounced expression at the parlor level, as is consistently seen across the block. I'll just pass over this slide and go right to the details. There's a subtle differentiation of the base course with just a stacked bond pattern of the limestone elements, from which we move to a running bond at the parlor level and above. There are, of course, these string courses separating the different zones of the facade. And again, at the parlor level, a more expressed and more pronounced header condition to accentuate that area of the facade. Then as we move up to the shaft, again, you can see quite a clear, elegant and simple, but historic expression of the facade elements, all the way from the window surrounds to the capitals, all the way up to the crown. And these are just details for your reference. Specification, coloration, details of the entry door and the windows. So I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions, so I think we'll move to our discussion then. So I'm going to ask you all to unmute so we can move and begin our discussion on this. And as was presented by Tim the last time, multiple times we've seen this, the commission, we saw a proposal to replace the existing facade with a new limestone facade. And I think that in both of the last iterations, the commission really felt that the approach was sort of neither fully contemporary and modern, nor was it reflecting the historic classical style buildings that are in the historic district. And so the applicant has come back this third time with some details to try to make it more contextual within the block, including double hung windows and keeping these window enfraiments that relate to the rest of the row, and really trying, I think, to speak to the sort of simple, kind of restrained classical facades that many of the row houses received in the early 20th century in this historic district. So we'll have our discussion now and see how we feel this new facade fits in with the historic district. Vice Chair Bland, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Well, I can't remember this. I guess I was involved, but I think the third time here is the charm. I'm a little sad to see it had to go in this direction to get approval and support. I think it's fine. It's elegant in its own simplicity, but a David Chipperfield type facade might have also been appropriate and could have, I hope, got approval here, but maybe it just wasn't ever quite that. So here's where we're gravitating, and I think it's completely appropriate at this point.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I did not see this proposal earlier, but looking at it right now in the current proposal, I think it's appropriate. It doesn't stand out. It's simple, and it lets a quite significant building next door take front stage. And I appreciate that. I do think that the light colored stone is the right choice as well. And it creates a simple, vertical, elegant facade that I think is totally appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
The details are simple and elegant, as you see in the section, I think, and the materiality is going to be a beautiful limestone. It's going to make it beautiful. I can accept that.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree. I think it could have gone either way, but I think the direction they've gone looks very well detailed and proportioned. And I agree that the limestone was the right choice of material. So I find it very appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I find it appropriate as well. I think it's very similar to a lot of buildings in the district in the way it's worked out. I share Fred's slight disappointment that they couldn't find a more creative way of working it out so that the level of detail was adequate to make it appropriate without having it to be necessarily so recessive. I mean, it's a funny location. If you look at that street front, it's wildly diverse and very variegated. So a different option could have, any number of different options could have been appropriate. Each to his own, I guess, but it is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
Wasn't here for the previous discussions, but this is appropriate.
Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with all the comments, especially Commissioner Chu's.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
I find this completely appropriate.
Okay, and Commissioner Master?
It's appropriate.
Okay, All right, so I think we're in agreement on this one. Commissioner Chu, would you be able to read the motion?
Sure. Okay. Just give me a minute. Sorry,
That's okay.
I'm having a hard time finding my document. Just give me 1 second. Oh, sorry, I just can't seem to find it with all these PDFs.
Okay, that's
Sorry.
okay. All right. Yeah, all right, Commissioner, I don't know, let me see. Commissioner Jefferson, have you got your document open?
I have it here, sorry.
Oh, okay, you've got it. Okay, great.
Sorry, excuse me.
That's okay.
In the case of LPC 2308-141, 363 Macon Street, Bed-Stuy Expanded Stuyvesant Heights Historic District.
Oh, no, sorry, go back. It's the public meeting comments, not the public hearing comments.
Oh, shoot.
So there are two different attachments.
Maybe you should have somebody take this, just in the interest of time.
Okay, I have it open, so let me just go ahead
yeah.
and do it. Okay, in the matter of LPC 22-11-297, 22 East 81st Street in the Metropolitan Museum Historic District, a row house originally designed by Tom and Wilson and built in 1883 to 84 and remodeled circa 1977 with a new stucco facade. This is an application to reclad the facade, replace windows, and modify openings. And I note that the building was under renovation at the time of designation, and that it falls and that within the Metropolitan Museum Historic District in the early years of the 20th century, many brownstone facades were extensively altered from the Italianate, Neo-Greek, and Queen Anne styles to the newly popular Beaux-Arts and Neo-Renaissance styles in limestone. And I recommend approval, finding that the removal of the existing modern stucco facade will not eliminate any significant architectural or historic features. That while the building was originally constructed as part of a row, this house and the majority of houses in this row have been extensively altered. Therefore, the proposed alterations will not detract from the unifying characteristics of an intact row. The proposed alterations are in keeping with the tradition within this historic district of houses being updated with references to the Beaux-Arts and Neo-Renaissance styles in limestone, that the installation of decorative details, including profiled window surrounds, projecting lintels, sills, and string courses will add depth and articulation to the facade, that the proposed 1/1 double hung wood windows will relate well to other buildings in the streetscape, and that the new openings will align with the historic openings at the neighboring row house, that the tall decorative limestone window surrounds above the second floor windows with an incised panel beneath the projecting lintel will establish a piano nobile and will be a modern reflection of the more decorative second floor window surrounds found at other altered buildings within the streetscape, that the expanded lintels at the fifth floor windows will enhance the relationship between the top floor and the tall parapet, that the scale of the proposed masonry openings at the ground floor will harmonize with other buildings in the streetscape, that the solid wood door within a tall, simply designed door surround will be in keeping with the design of other solid wood doors found in the streetscape, and that this emphasis on the main entrance will fit within the traditional hierarchy of the design, and that the proposed redesign of the facade will return a more historic scale and fenestration pattern that will relate to the existing eclectic streetscape, thereby enhancing the special architectural character of the historic district. Okay, Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
I will second that.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, that's approved. Thank you. So we are about a half an hour behind schedule, so we will break for lunch right now, and we will come back and resume the afternoon session with our first public hearing item, and we'll do our public hearing agenda this afternoon. So we will break now, come back at 1:30, and we'll ask all members of the public to voluntarily exit the meeting at this time so that you don't have difficulties should you wish to return for any items this afternoon. And we'll see everybody at 1:30. Thank you.